you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Finds dannyphantom in MHA. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of RusEmp on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. There were many aspects to being prepared for the UA entrance exam, in particular to the theoretical side of it. The written test included your normal tasks in several subjects: math, English, history, and Japanese. Tsukachi lamented the fact that they had to hurdle all of those together, probably going off the grades the middle schoolers had. Danny was at a disadvantage in this regard, and while the UA was willing to overlook that part and let him participate, they would be extra judgmental when grading the teen. So, Phantom needed to be prepared for that part too. He was 1 year ahead technically, having finished the first grade at Casper High. However, his past marks, which barely reached CS, were a sign that such a head start wasn't going to get him far. Tsukachi said many times that Danny wouldn't have to worry much about the languages part, since English was the tongue the teen spoke since his early childhood. And since the locals studied it as a foreign language, Danny wouldn't have any difficulty with the tasks. The detective also praised Danny's ability with the Japanese, and the teen didn't have the heart to tell Tsukachi why he understood it so well. Nonetheless, these two subjects were hardly a priority. Math was a dubious topic. On the one hand, Danny could calculate difficult equations and find solutions to problems. But when the tasks demanded the knowledge of logarithms and complex algebra, he was absolutely helpless. Back in the US it was much simpler, so now the teen needed to learn those parts from scratch. But the primary bane of his existence was history. Needless to say that it touched upon the Japanese one, something Danny had no idea about. 1 month was not nearly enough to grasp anything but the most basic concepts and key points, especially for the country as old as Japan. Especially for another world whose history took a drastic turn at some point. He was going to face total ruination during that subject. Well, it was only a fourth of all the questions. It was something Danny could only hope to compensate for with his practical exam. Nonetheless, his stubbornness would not allow the teen to just give up and drop the attempts. Not like he could do much except preparations. Speaking of the practical exam, Danny was going to be thorough with that aspect, too. Tsukachi was bound to be vehemently opposed to the teen's plans, so he would remain oblivious about that part of his training regimen. The detective didn't notice his absence, because Danny made sure to use his duplication power. While dannyphantom remained in the apartment and studied, Phantom, or rather his anonymous counterpart Pariah, returned to the underground arena. He was eager to practice some new moves on the people who were fully prepared to receive a beating. He got himself a proper mask for fighting, and many more fighters fell from grace because of that one unbeatable kid. His reputation grew, and in a couple of weeks he was already known as someone who would end the fight in a couple of minutes. If he felt like it, even quicker. His streak of victories caught the attention of some shady individuals. Phantom was invited to several gangs, leading the teen to believe that that's how they usually found new members. A logical path to take. There were some interesting potential employers, like a guy in white wearing a plague doctor mask, but edgy looks alone were not enough to sway the half-ghost. Promises of wealth, too, fell on deaf ears, and the plague doctor appeared quite disgruntled by the answer. Danny had a goal in mind. Joining a gang was not it. He could come across as conceited, but Phantom did consider himself above the usual crowd of that establishment, and he wasn't afraid to voice his low opinion. It never reached the point of him coming up to the challengers and insulting them, but a single provocative line was enough to unleash all the wit he could muster, and he certainly had something to mock. Humans, no matter the size, were weaker and less durable than ghosts, his usual adversaries. Danny had to constantly adjust his output, be it a blast, a punch, or a stab. He didn't wish to kill or severely maim his opponents. It was an excellent practice that would be useful to him in the future. His control over the output meant better control of his powers in general, and would allow for their further evolution. Furthermore, it put less strain on his core and allowed to remain a ghost for longer periods of time. If the UA wouldn't teach anything like it, then the school would prove to be a total waste of time in the end. It wouldn't make sense for them not to, so Danny remained optimistic. It must have been good if so many people sang praises to it. As an extra bonus, Danny also earned himself some cash that he decided to store in a safe place for a rainy day. It certainly wasn't the income of a professional wrestler or a soccer player, but it was solid. A single pay could allow him to rent a small apartment, and since Danny had no need for such expenses at the moment, he could only store it, especially since people tended to notice such things. The local revenue services would be after his pelt if he actually spent all of those at once. In the meantime, as both his mind and body were going through rigorous training, the day of the exam finally arrived. Danny himself was shocked at how quickly the month had passed. Tsukachi made sure to wake up the teen as early as possible, despite the latter having set up an alarm clock. It was so that Danny still had a couple of things to shove into his head before the exam actually started, or he could at least sort the subjects and bring some order to his depository of knowledge. Danny had no idea what the man meant, and he didn't want him to elaborate. As Tsukachi fussed around the kitchen in an attempt to conjure a proper breakfast, the teen couldn't help but think about the past month. After all, most of what was happening with Danny's life at the moment was because of that man. Sure, Phantom may not appreciate his restrictions, but Tsukachi was a good person, aside from actually taking him in. Tsukachi wasn't letting the situation magically resolve itself and instead chose to take an active part in the life of a boy he chose to take in. Danny couldn't remember his own parents paying as much attention. Admittedly, the bar was low, but the detective was making an active effort on his own. The man's diligence applied even to bringing up a child. Tsukachi helped Danny with his studies as much as he could, and each time they drove somewhere, he would pop a quiz on the topics Danny was learning at the moment. The teen may have grumbled, but the detective could see that the boy secretly appreciated it. That seemed to be a trend. Tsukachi had the time to see as much. Danny was used to toughing it out. His immensely powerful quirk and vigilante past combined to create a special set of views. He was the only hero of his town, the one who was also scorned by the populace. He didn't see much cooperation and aid from people other than his team of associates. Danny told his guardian that he didn't always work alone, and that his friends and sister sometimes aided him from the backstage. Sam, Jazz and Tucker could not fight on an even ground with villains like Danny. That's why he chose to act on his own most of the time. In the middle of the night, or right during the classes, he sneaked out and faced the bastards alone. He didn't wish to be a burden, so he never told them about all the extra fighting he did. Tsukachi set a goal for himself to get rid of that mindset, but it wasn't something that could be fixed in a single month. Perhaps being in a school of heroes could seal the deal, and as they rode towards it, the detective was still trying his best. Alright, what was the name of the event that restored imperial rule in Japan? Danny scratched his temple. Meiji something. Tsukachi sighed. It's in the question, Danny. Meiji Restoration, it is. Hey, I was half right. Unfortunately, being half right doesn't give you half a point, Danny. Well, it should. Danny crossed his hands. I just would like to end this as quick as possible. Danny. The teen threw his head backwards and moaned. Fine, I'll do my best. You are not hoping to cheat, are you? Phantom threw him a small glare. Have I told you how my last attempt almost killed everyone dear to me at the time? And my English teacher. Sheesh. Tsukachi shook his head. I guess not. Still, we could use more time to prepare. What's done is done. No reason to worry about something out of your control. Danny smirked and sunk into his seat. I know I'll try my hardest. That should be enough. Tsukachi could only hope that the boy would perform well. The car finally stopped, and since the man himself was not allowed entry, that was the time for a final encouraging word. Well, here we are. The detective looked at his charge, who was too busy gazing at the distant school building. Are you all right, Danny? The teen did not respond immediately. Just my last-minute doubts. I'm still not completely sure if that's what I want to do. Tsukachi sighed and set the car in a parking mode. You worked hard this entire month, kid. Will you really reduce all that time to nothing because you got cold feet? You sound like you are giving me a challenge, answered Danny, his voice still dripping with snark. Maybe. I've come to learn that you don't shirk from one. It's not that I'm afraid, Tsukachi-san. Hell, if I fail, it won't be much of a deal for me. Tsukachi seemed to catch on to what the boy was saying. You still aren't sure if that's what you want. Danny nodded. Yeah, I mean, it is a good option, don't get me wrong. And with this practical exam part I actually get a chance to get into a good school. But I still worry that it will turn out to be a waste of time. What if everything ends up the same way as before? I guess there isn't much I can say that I haven't said already. It really is entirely up to you, Danny. The school will provide you with everything you might need to better your skills. This will be a waste of time only if you allow it to be so. If you turn your back on becoming a better hero, you saw your flaws, then work on eradicating them instead of sweeping it all under a rug. Alright. The teen once again nodded. You are right. I guess we will see how it works out. I know what I said, but I am confident in you. You studied really hard, and your quirk is extremely powerful. So, don't go into the extremes. You have a good standing. But don't get too cocky either. Tsukachi raised his fist, break a leg. Danny smiled and fist pumped, before unbuckling the seating belt and exiting the car. As Tsukachi gave him a thumbs up and asked to give him a call immediately after, he drove away to work, leaving the teen alone in a spacious area right near the entrance to the school. Briefly looking back, Danny could see the entire Musutafu. The UA was located atop of a hill, and the teen realized that he had seen it many times before without realizing what it was. Phantom put hands in the pockets of his pants. Tsukachi had insisted that Danny wore something more formal for that day, despite the latter's reluctance. The notion that the local schools had compulsory uniforms filled the teen's heart with dread and nasty memories of his arch-nemesis. His shirt was still all over the place, and his messy hair did not comply. The next thing the teen saw was a myriad of middle schoolers heading the same way Danny was. In that stream of hopefuls, the half-ghost noticed some kids that stood out too much, with their claws, wings, horns, and other unusual physical traits. What was different now was the fact that those people must have been feeling pretty confident about their quirks and could use them for fighting. Nobody was going to attack him, of course, but Danny saw the competition they posed. Other than the people who were usually the blandest folk in the background of every show, he also noticed one person in particular. With a smirk, the teen quickly narrowed the distance between him and the raven-haired boy he had seen a month ago. The guy didn't notice Phantom before it was too late, and once an unknown boy invaded his personal space, Kirishima yelped and jumped. "Hello," Danny said and grinned. "What the heck, man? You scared me." Kirishima raised his voice. "Yeah, that seems to be a trend," the half-ghost responded thoughtfully, rubbing the back of his neck. "And here I wanted to apologize for the last time." "Last time? Who are you?" "Name's Danny. And you must be Kirishima, am I right?" "Yes, that's me. Have we met before?" The Japanese boy looked at him in confusion. "Yes, you and some other guys decided to enter an abandoned house. The cause of your soiled pants is before you," Danny cackled. "Not the best way to get acquainted, I admit. What were the odds that we would meet again?" Kirishima seemed to reminisce about the incident, and his red eyes went wide. "No way. You did all of that?" "Yep. Don't worry, it'll stay between us. I just came over to say hi and apologize. So, sorry for the scare. Off I go now." "Wait." Kirishima stopped Danny before he went too far. "Did Sumeragi ask you to do that?" Danny's story was too detailed to be a hoax, so he was instantly believed. "Don't know who you are talking about," the half-ghost shrugged. "I just felt like giving a scare." The teen gave him a deadpan look. "You have a strange way of meeting new people." "Oh, so you noticed. I wonder why they stay away afterwards." Danny pretended to think. "And I just got rid of social anxiety, too." "It's not a big deal, really," responded Kirishima. "It was a very cool show, man. Very believable, too," he mumbled. Of course it was. Danny was a half-ghost. He was almost a real deal. Danny smirked and crossed his hands. "I am glad to receive some valuable feedback, Kirishima-san," he said. "So, no hard feelings, right?" "Yeah, sure." Kirishima smirked too. "You came all this way to apologize, after all." "It was only a couple of meters," Danny said and looked back to check. "You alone here? I haven't seen anyone familiar yet." "No." "Wanna tag along?" Kirishima raised an eyebrow at the sudden offer, but nodded. "Sure thing." Danny took the lead as they went towards the school building. They got an easy way in thanks to the provided IDs. Danny was glad to have received a Japanese one thanks to Tsukachi's heavy effort. The building itself was a colossal glass structure composed of several interconnected pillars. It was there when the children were supposed to go through the written test. It was also a nice excursion around the place to entice the hopefuls. As they stood in line, Danny and Kirishima continued the conversation. "So, you can harden yourself?" asked Danny. "You guessed right," Kirishima said proudly. "That explains how you broke the door on your way out." Phantom threw him a small smirk. Kirishima's shoulders sank. "Come on, man. We just agreed to leave it behind us." No, we agreed to keep it between us." Danny's smirk did not leave his face. "But if you want, I do." "That was so unmanly I am still embarrassed," Kirishima sighed. "Anyways, it's strange seeing you here." "Strange, huh? What? You thought that scaring people is all I do?" "I didn't mean it like that. That's the only thing I know about ya." "Can't really blame you," Danny said. "Up until a month ago I didn't even imagine myself coming here. I can relate, actually, but I am confident in my wish now. I want to be just like my favorite hero, Crimson Riot. And I will." The half-ghost rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, you are sure better motivated than I am." "Don't you want to become a hero?" asked Kirishima. "Don't get me started on this again." My guardian was pretty insistent, that's all. Guardian? Oh, sorry, it must be personal. Got that part right, Danny said, before an awkward silence settled between them. He made an attempt to resolve the issue by changing the topic. Geez, this line just doesn't get smaller. Can't they sort people faster? Well, we already registered, so they know we are here, at least. Danny sighed dramatically. Take solace in small things, Fenton, he told himself quietly. The line near the entrance shortened, and eventually Danny and Kirishima made it towards the desk. That's where Danny froze. At the desk sat one particular hero, wrapped in a scarf, looking as tired as ever. Of all the people to work there, you all right, kid? Aizawa asked him. Oh, yes, sorry, Danny snapped out of his stupor. Then don't make everyone wait. Name? Daniel Fenton, the teen responded. Dan. All right. For future reference, all official documents start with your last name, Eraserhead explained, clearly seeing that the boy was not local. He looked on the list and nodded. You take the exam in a classroom C. Follow the signs on the walls. Okay, thanks. Danny smirked and left. He waited a bit for Kirishima, and to his surprise, the two were put in the same classroom. As the two kids went to the assigned room, Aizawa shot a brief look at Danny's back. He had a feeling they had met somewhere before. Shaking his head, the hero went back to directing the kids. The written test was going to take 2 hours. The second the bell rang, Danny flipped the test paper and got down to business. Kirishima occasionally glanced at his newest acquaintance, marveling at how quickly the half-ghost was filling in the gaps. In reality, Phantom simply started with language questions, and after half an hour he was done with them. Just as expected, he didn't have any difficulties. But soon the complications began and his pace slowed down. Math questions weren't something extraordinary. Danny at least memorized some formulas. Geometry was something he dealt with in his parents' lab, so the tasks to calculate the surface area of an octagon or the volume of a cylinder were difficult, but not unsolvable. The equations were dealt with somehow. Danny could only hope for a success. History was not something he was going to discuss afterwards, lest he brought further shame to his name. After the final bell rang, Danny could only sigh and sign his test sheets. The students were then instructed to go to an auditorium for a proper briefing on how the practical exam was going to take place. I am doomed, Kirishima moaned along the way. Doomed, I say. That's what everyone says. Cheer up, they announced the results only in a week. The doom part will come only then, Danny said and lightly nudged him. Kirishima snorted and gave a toothy grin. Yeah, you're right. So, what do you think the practical test is gonna be like? Phantom hummed. Unless they want to keep the tests up until the end of the week. It must be something all of us participate in, together. Something hero-like, too. I imagine it to be a mock battle of some kind. That's what heroes do, right? Huh, you're right, Kirishima said excitedly. I've been training hard, so I want to give it my all, see. Same goes for me. I always were a practice guy myself. Kirishima-kun. The sudden call from a distance caught both of them off guard. From a crowd of students emerged a curious-looking girl. Had Danny not possessed a sense for supernatural, he would have thought that before him stood a ghost. She had pink skin, and her puffy, unruly hair had the same color. The bizarre appearance did not end there, because the girl's eyes were pitch black, with yellow irises. To top it all off, both literally and figuratively, there were also small yellowish horns peeking from under the hair. Danny couldn't guess her theme at all. Friend of yours, Kirishima-san? The half-ghost asked, looking at the teen in question. That's Ashido Mina, my classmate, explained Kirishima. Hello there, the peppy girl smiled at the boys. It's good to see that you made it here, Kirishima-kun. Kirishima smirked and puffed out his chest. It wasn't easy, but here we are. Wait, you guys did something besides the entrance stuff? Asked Danny in befuddlement. His two acquaintances looked at each other and nodded. Yeah, the finals at the middle school. Huh, I didn't go through any. Tsukachi, you sly bastard, Danny chuckled. Well, don't look into a gifted horse's mouth, they say. Well, did you get a recommendation? Asked Mina in awe. Not an official one, at least. I really need to ask the old man about this. I'm Danny, by the way. Mina cackled. Nice to meet ya. Hey, you going to an auditorium, too? Mind adding another person to your party? Danny leaned forward a bit, lowering his eyes to her level, and pretended to carefully examine her. What class are you, fellow adventurer? He asked in all seriousness. We got a tank and a wizard already. Why are you a wizard? Kirishima asked and scratched his temple. Because Demon Lord is not a class, Danny shrugged. I can be a wizard or a rogue, Mina grinned. A very pretty one, too. Phantom smirked. No objections on my part. What says brave warrior Kirishima? I say that we accept this brave lady, Kirishima responded sagely, before the three of them laughed. Danny couldn't help the pleasant feeling arising in his stomach. The company of the people close to his age was something he had left behind in Amity more than a month ago. Tsukachi was a nice man, but it simply wasn't the same feeling. The building where the auditorium was located appeared enormous, and it was roughly the size of a soccer field, perhaps even bigger. "Oh, come on," Kirishima exclaimed, seeing a crowd that formed near the exit. "Another line. How long do we have to wait?" Mina moaned, before noticing Danny's thoughtful expression. "Fenton-san, I guess we can make a shortcut." He stood between the two, outstretching his hands to them. "What are you planning?" "You'll see. We can always stand here instead of waiting on a comfy chair." "Nope." Both of them responded and took his hands. "All right, watch your step, even if it might be hard, and don't make extra noise. This might tingle." Before anyone could ask what was going on, the teens were shocked to see their bodies disappear from view. Danny was quick to react. "Now we just move forward," he said, leading the group right into the crowd. "Wait, how are we gonna?" Kirishima didn't have time to finish the sentence before the cool, tingly feeling spread across his entire body. Both he and Mina saw how they were actually going through the people standing in the line. Neither said a word along the way, just as Danny had instructed, and after several seconds they were already inside. Phantom released his hold, and everyone flicked back into visible spectrum. "Well, here is that, at least," Danny mumbled. "Dude, that was awesome. Is this your quirk?" asked Mina excitedly. "Yep, I call it Ghost for a reason. I can also pass this power to other objects I hold." "Won't you work as a rogue class, then?" Mina said, looking to be in thought. "You're right, but my arsenal is bigger than what you have seen. Come on, or they will take the best spots." As Danny went forward, Mina looked at Kirishima with a curious expression. "Where did you meet this guy? He doesn't go to our school, right?" "Oh, aim." Kirishima turned away to hide his embarrassment. "I just came over to say hi." Danny once again appeared near them, having noticed them falling behind. "Duh." Mina jumped, swinging her hands in a way slightly resembling an actual martial art. "A little warning." "Yeah, that's how he greeted me, too," Kirishima said tiredly. "You'll get used to it." Danny smiled and put hands on his belt, noticing the grateful look from Kirishima. "Don't lag behind." Upon entering the main hall, the teens could only marvel once more at the size of the structure. The school was far from humble, and to dedicate so much space and put so many seats just to make announcements was insane. There was a single stage in the middle, alongside a huge screen for all to see. As Kirishima and Mina ogled the surroundings with bated breath, Danny dropped down on the nearest seat. As his fellow hopefuls sat nearby, deeper inside the row, he put his legs on the back of the chair in front of him. "Hey, if someone wants to sit there, I'll stop," he said, seeing the judgmental looks. The answer seemed to have satisfied the anxious middle schoolers. The hall was filling up slowly, but at least the trio managed to get some good seats. Wishing to kill some time, Mina gave in to her curious nature. "Say, Fenton-san, what school did you go to?" "You wouldn't know of it," Danny responded smoothly. "I was actually a high schooler before moving, but I have to start over now." "That sucks, man," Kirishima said. "Wait, how old are you?" 15. "Really?" Mina giggled. "What's so strange?" Danny narrowed his eyes. "You just look like you are 13 or something." The half-ghost's unamused expression for some reason caused even more laughs. "Laugh all you want," Danny mocked, "but I bet I'll score better than you during the practical." "Oh, are we making bets?" asked Mina with excitement. "You want some challenge, Fenton-san?" Kirishima smirked and clenched his fist. The next moment it hardened into a stone-like form. "This ain't gonna be easy." "You are on," Danny responded, letting his eyes glow. "What about you, Mina?" "I don't know what either of you can do at your best," she shrugged, "so I'm not gonna risk it." "I am actually curious how you will do, Mina," said Danny. "I didn't get to see many people with quirks before. I find the inventive uses really interesting." "I feel ya. I already see a lot of strong people around here." Kirishima took a look around the hall. "This will be a tough competition." The lights above them began to dim, while the stage remained brightly lit. There was no clearer sign that the show was about to begin. Danny had his eyes transfixed on the stage, his barely beating heart picking up the pace. He was more excited about this than he dared to admit. His competitive spirit was reignited, and there would be no other chance to learn once and for all where he stood in this world's pecking order. After what felt like hours of expectation, a loud, booming voice rang across the entire area. "Welcome, future heroes. Let's get this briefing started." The voice of a man emerging in the middle of the auditorium felt oddly familiar to the half-ghost. The long-haired blonde in a leather jacket excitedly flaunted his hands all around, radiating enormous amounts of energy. The next moment Danny groaned upon being assaulted by a barrage of lights and sounds. That sure was one way of introducing kids to an elite school. "He sounds familiar," Danny mumbled, miraculously heard by Mina. "Of course he does." The girl squealed. This is Present Mike we are talking about. I never thought I would see him in person. That's so cool. Wait, you mean the radio DJ? Danny rubbed the back of his neck. He is also a famous pro hero. Kirishima whispered. Talk about a giving a welcome. We were guided here by heroes, though, Danny reminded. Yeah, but the presentation, man. Do you think he is one of the teachers? I dunno, Danny shrugged. I mean, he is a DJ, a hero. Do you think he has the time to be a teacher, too? Who knows? But if they are calling Present Mike as an announcer guy, how great do you think the rest of the school is? I guess you are right. It's really cool. Present Mike was a music connoisseur if it hadn't been obvious from his DJ job. The song pick for the sudden introduction was catchy and suited Danny's tastes a lot. Still, it wasn't what they came here for. When the flashy introduction was done with, the energetic man continued to speak. Welcome to today's live performance. Everyone, say hey. Even the crickets were silent this time. Well, that's cool, my examinee listeners. Danny was honestly impressed by the man's ability to smoothly ignore the lack of any feedback. I'm here to present the guidelines for your upcoming test. Are you ready? A good joke was the one that could be repeated more than once. Mike was once again met with silence, and Phantom's befuddlement turned into amusement. Still, he snapped his fingers, and the screen above showed a branching diagram. This is how the test will go, my listeners. You will be experiencing 10-minute-long mock cityscape maneuvers. Bring along whatever you want, and after this presentation you'll head to an assigned testing locations. Danny smirked and leaned back in his seat. He turned out to be correct about the exam. He still was unsure about how exactly they were going to be graded. Noticing Mina and Kirishima look at the special cards they were given at the entrance, Danny looked down and finally realized what those big single letters meant, the test site where they would be graded. HM, guess we will not see each other perform, Danny said, looking over Mina's shoulder. Yeah, that's really a bummer, Kirishima grumbled. So, we just trust each other's words after we are done. I guess so. You can just wait until the results arrive, Mina offered. No can do, the boys said simultaneously. This has become a matter of principle, lady, Danny added, receiving a confident nod from Kirishima. The latter's conviction seemed to surprise Mina for some reason. She didn't have time to think about it for long, because the announcer was not yet done. Each site you visit is filled with 3 types of faux villains, he said as the screen showed the shadowy silhouettes. You get points for dispatching the enemies. Each type of faux villains gets you points according to their difficulty levels. As Mike went on with his explanations, numbers 1, 2, and 3 were slapped on the silhouettes. The images then changed to show a shadowy figure dispatching of the foes by hopping on them. Is this Mario? Danny quietly voiced his surprise. Feel free to use the full potential of your quirk to disable the villains and earn your points. Of course, playing antihero and attacking other students is prohibited and will result in your disqualification. The dig. May I ask a question? The sudden question came from an audience. It was quite dark in the rest of the hall, but the boy who spoke up was not far from the teen. The guy was tall, and his look screamed that the guy meant business. A neat and tidy suit, the glasses and carefully combed dark blue hair all formed a strong impression. There was something robotic about the way he moved, straightforward and hardly agile. Perhaps it was his way of showing his righteous intentions. He actively tapped on his own list as he spoke loudly without even waiting for the permission. On this handout there appear to be no less than 4 types of villains. He spoke with an official tone. Such a blatant error, if it is one, is highly unbecoming of UA, Japan's top academy. We're all here today in hopes of being molded into model heroes. Without taking another breath, he suddenly looked up and right into Danny's eyes, much to the latter's surprise. And you, with raven hair, remove your legs from the front seat. If this is a game for you, then please leave immediately. Danny was not letting it slide. Who put you in charge? He asked loudly. The newfound stickler was not going to waste time on bickering. The guy was the antithesis of the word discreetness, but Danny actually decided to follow suit and sit normally. He didn't want to be known as someone disruptive. The guy sure is fun, Danny muttered. He is just too straightforward, whispered Mina in an attempt to ease the tension. All right. Mike was quick to the rescue. Ignoring the brief argument, he decided to answer the question of an overly diligent boy. Examinee 7111, thanks for calling in. The hero smiled brightly. You see, the 4th type of faux villains gives you 0 points. Those are more of an obstacle than anything else. One such guy will rampage in close quarters and must be avoided. The stickler boy bowed his head. Thank you, sir. Sorry for the interruption. As he sat back, Present Mike opened his arms wide and with the ever-present excitement and hype, went on to finish his speech. That's all from me. I'll leave my listeners with our school motto. The great hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said true heroism consists in being superior to the ills of life. Present Mike smiled, plus ultra. Break a leg, everyone. And this time, the man's call resonated with the audience, and the crowd of students shouted back, plus ultra. Danny wasn't among the more excitable people in the crowd. His mind was focused at the task laid out before him. He was going to fight against soulless machines, which Danny found perfect. The stars finally aligned, and against robots he could allow himself to go all out. They wanted to bring out and assess everyone's potential. It was also a no-brainer, relatively speaking. It was no rescue, there were no damsels tied to a railroad. Just good, old-fashioned beating. He wasn't the only person happy about the development. His companions were happy as well. Kirishima himself fought in close quarters, so the opportunity to engage in a fist fight with machines excited him. Mina shared her own power with Danny, and it was just as destructive if need be. Her skin could secrete acid. The half-ghost was still wondering about the theme part. So, Fenton-san, Kirishima grinned, how do we count? The points or the robots? Nobody will count the robots. Let's go with points, Danny said and put hands in his pockets. Welp, off I go now. Good luck to you, guys. Same to you, said Mina. Let's see each other after we are done. Sure thing, Danny saluted. How about the loser treating everyone to lunch? Huh, Kirishima. Cannot wait for my free ramen, responded the Japanese boy. Smirking, the half-ghost set out for his assigned zone. As he went, the teen opened his palm and let the energy flow between his fingers. The time was finally coming for him to show the world, or at least a certain part of it, what he was fully capable of. The practical test was supposed to make up for the shortcomings of the written one. He had to remind this to himself constantly. Thus he had to go far and beyond what his competitors could reach. He joked about it near Kirishima, but he was dead set on leaving the guy in the dust, along with others. He almost felt bad about leaving the guy zero chances. It was his potential that helped him pass certain stipulations. To deny it, to hold back, was to betray the expectations of the man to whom Danny owed a great deal. Even if the teen was unsure if that's what he wanted, it was the opportunity. And if he was reluctant to pursue that goal, he could do it as a form of payback to Tsukachi. Phantom needed a purpose of his own, so let the temporary one guide him. The feeling was new to the teen, and at the same time, he was used to it. Danny was a hero of two worlds. He had a reason to fight, for he wanted to protect the safety of others. It was something the teen had unconsciously accepted, neglecting the fact that he received no gratitude for it. So, Phantom was accustomed to fighting for others. Now, the positions were switched. Tsukachi performed the feat and, unlike the ungrateful masses, Danny was going to repay his debt in full. Perhaps it sounded too dramatic, but Danny was serious about his intentions. He was going to ace that exam. His confidence was not shaken when he saw the testing area, or, at least, the tall buildings that peeked from behind the tall walls. The size of said wall was gargantuan. The testing area had to be the size of a small district. The concept alone left Danny in awe, for there were many of such areas. He knew the school was an elite one, but the funds required to build all of that must have been massive. Furthermore, that size also meant limited observations on the part of the teachers. Maybe the robots had a depth camera of sorts, but then how would they account for stealth attacks? Or maybe the cameras were spread across the entire area. Danny couldn't comprehend the scale of conducted work, so he was genuinely impressed. Casper High had nothing on this. Shaking his head, the teen freed his mind of such boorish questions. He wasn't at the school just yet. The time to brag would only come later. Phantom saw other students coming to the closed front entrance, each of them wearing something more appropriate for fighting, gym uniforms, t-shirts, and the sort. Danny glanced at his own getup, knowing how he needed to change himself. Another thing the teen saw was the looks the people were giving him. So he was already that unruly guy from the main hall. The Haffa had a good hearing. He heard the whispers. Danny had long since learned to ignore those, but now he wondered if there was actually some merit to the situation. He needed to start thinking about what kind of hero he was going to be. Kirishima was a hard, straightforward one. Vina appeared to be cheerful and friendly. Eraserhead, the man that arrested him, was quiet and gloomy, the total opposite of the number one All Might, boisterous and charming in his own way. Danny would have to come up with his own idea, realize his strong points and act upon them more. But that was a story for another day. The teen saw that enough people gathered near the entrance. The call to action could happen any minute now. With his peripheral sight, Danny could see Present Mike on one of the side towers. That could only mean one thing. On begin, the loud hero shouted, his voice resonating across the entirety of the huge area. The The most quick-thinking examinees did not need to be told twice, and the crowd of students started pushing each other before they even made it to the gates. Danny took a deep breath. That was it. His time to brightly shine had come. Going ghost, he whispered, raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Immediately the familiar rings of moonlight emerged, traveling up and down his body. The gaze of his blazing emerald eyes was turned towards the entrance. Without wasting another second, he assumed the proper launching position and lunged forward. The force of his push was enough to leave cracks on the asphalt path, and Phantom flew over everyone's heads at a neck-breaking speed. He couldn't hear his surprised competitors, nor had the opportunity to see their faces. The half got well ahead of the rest, before grinding to a halt. If the teachers had their cameras set all around, he could fight even far away from the rest, without depriving the others from the opportunity to fight. However, looking around from his spot in the air, he didn't see any bots in close vicinity. What, you guys got scared already? The teen mocked the empty air. Can't really blame ya. He had barely finished the sentence before seeing something coming at him from above. Danny bolted to the side at the last second, and as the machine landed on the ground with thunderous noise, the teen got a good look at it. The best and concise description would be Robo-Scorpion. The green robot had number 2 plastered on its legs, and its 3 red eyes immediately spotted the target. Wow, that's some cool design, Danny said with genuine excitement. The robot did not appreciate the compliment, dead set on causing harm. The metal beast lunged forward, swinging its claws and tails sporadically. Danny could guess where its weak spots were. For many animals, normal, ghost or machine, stomach was the most vulnerable place. The machine had its belly near the ground. The ever-present compromise of engine and armor must have been reflected there. They must have saved up on protection down there. As the machine ran forward with animalistic ferocity, Danny put the tip of his leg on the ground. The next second a line of ice spikes started emerging from the ground, meeting the robot head-on. The ice pierced through the machine's stomach. He must have hit the fuel tank, because the robot instantly exploded into the boy's grinning face. His hair was a mess, so he pulled them back. Looks like the guess was spot on. 2 points for Phantom. If that bot was something average, the half-ghost was in for an easy ride. Those were training bots built without intention to kill the students who had no prior fighting experience. For all the suspense and drama the school was playing in the giveaway, Danny just had to play smart and not underestimate the opponents. At the very least, they would waste too much of his time. Phantom's ears caught the sounds of distant fighting all around. It appeared that everyone was getting into the fights. As he thought about this, the walls of the nearest building shattered into pieces. From the inside rolled out another robot, a different kind. It was a 3-pointer, a tall mech-style machine that had its visors set on the teen from the start. That guy wasn't going to go down as easily. Before the teen attacked it, he heard the whirring of the wheels behind him. Briefly looking back, the teen saw robots coming from behind. Those were 1-pointers, smaller 2-handed bots moving on huge single wheels. Danny noticed the 3-pointer going for the hit, but the teen turned intangible at the last second. The immediate danger passed and the teen jumped on top of the arm stuck in the pavement. The half outstretched his palm and created a sword made of hardened ice. He stabbed the robot's hand and lunged towards the robot's top, without taking the blade out of the opponent's limb. Once there, Danny jumped in the air and used his free hand to fire an ectoblast at the grouped 1-pointers. The explosion ripped the weak bots apart before the teen began to fall. In a single motion, Danny swung his weapon downward. A single roar escaped his mouth as he cut the machine in half. As he landed on the ground, the sword snapped in half. Tossing the weapon aside, Phantom started looking for more robots, taking into the air once more. Perhaps going too far was not the best idea. The organizers probably kept most bots closer to the students. Phantom became a blur of black and white that bolted from one building to another on each side of the street, phasing through the walls and occasionally blowing the robots' hideouts. Since they were operational and could fight back, the teen saw nothing illegal in this. As the teen phased inside one such building, however, he was immediately greeted by a swing of a metallic arm. With a yelp, Phantom rolled in the air, sliding right under the swing, the hit missing him by an inch. Danny landed on the ground and slid across it. Geez, you tin cans can actually learn. Color me impressed. So far his attacks on the hidden bots were swift and merciless. They didn't have the time to react. This time the 3-pointer was ready for him. The area still had the machine at a disadvantage. The robot was an elephant in a china shop. Its mobility was restricted even if the building was largely hollow. Still, the 3-pointer totally ignored the stipulations, ramming through the columns of concrete and steel. Danny readied himself for the hit and raised his ice-encased forearm to meet it. The force of the strike staggered the robot and shattered Phantom's protection. Danny gritted his teeth, not expecting the hit to be this hard. However, the bot was thrown off balance by the impact, and that's what Phantom wanted. Before the machine could attack again, charging a blast with both hands, Phantom put them together and blasted the three-pointer with tremendous strength, enough to force the fight outside. Danny bolted outside, and the heavily damaged machine did not resist what followed next. Phantom's gloved fist, imbued with ectoplasmic energy, made an impact with the robot's three-eyed face. The hit was strong enough to get through the armor and damage the main processing core. The light in the robot's eyes was gone, and the teen took it as his win. Thankfully, this time the machine did not explode, collapsing on the ground instead. Danny grinned upon adding more points to his collection. The teen then noticed that down the street a group of examinees was fighting, too, so he actually made it back to the rest. His expectations for a proper fight turned out to be well placed, because from the alleyway emerged even more robots, the weaker ones. Smirking, Phantom swiped his finger. An unfortunate one-pointer, surrounded by green light, was rammed into another and blocked the exit, but a two-pointer leaped into the air and avoided the improvised projectile, going straight for the target. Now Danny opened and swiped his entire palm, and the invisible force first pinned the scorpion to the ground, before launching it into a wall, running the machine along it, back on the ground, and then sending it into the air. Phantom flew to it and grabbed one of the robot's tails. His next move was to throw the now piece of junk at the unfortunate one-pointers at the speed not enough for them to react. Seeing more robots above on the rooftops and below, Danny prepared himself for the continuous onslaught. Yet he wasn't ready for a suicidal jump a two-pointer from the nearby roof made in an attempt to get him down to the ground. Phantom made another blade and stabbed the machine, again in the belly, before throwing both the scorpion and the weapon half inside it onto the ground. The robot exploded, but the half-ghost wasn't done. He saw the robots below coming for the rest of the students. "I apologize, folks," Danny said and laughed, theatrically opening his arms wide. "But these ones are mine." The sky around the Halfa was filled with a pleiad of glimmering icicles. Like bullets from a machine gun, the sharp pieces of ice were hurled forward, raining on the ground below, going through the robots like knife through butter. The machines fell down one after another, covered in deadly icy needles, albeit most of the damage was caused by the icicles now inside of them. The triumphant half-ghost softly landed on one of the downed robots, basking in the metaphorical light of the people's attention. The span of said attention was short, however, because everyone had to get back to fighting, and Phantom himself was not exception. And he had his eyes set on the approaching three-pointer. The huge machine quickly rolled down the street, crushing the downed robots beneath it. Danny got into a position for meeting it with a punch, his arms surrounded by sparks of ectoplasmic energy. However, at the last second, the robot received a hit at its side with an almost comically large fist. Phantom's head immediately snapped in direction where the punch came from. That Popeye-style attack was done by a slim red-headed girl, who managed to push the robot backwards by her attack. Panting for breath, she glanced at Phantom. Sorry, she wiped her mouth with the normal-sized hand. But this guy is mine. If anything, Danny was amused. She obviously mocked what he said just then. The next second the three-pointer came for another attack, and the girl was about to jump away, when a green barrier blocked the strike of the machine. Surprised, she looked at Phantom again. "If you want to snatch my kill, then don't get distracted," he called to her, before the barrier lightly blew into the bot's face. The girl saw the created smoke as a perfect opening, so she lunged forward and swung her enlarged fist. The impact seemed to be enough for the three-pointer to fall, but not die. As she continued to pummel the robot, Danny saw a two-pointer jump out of one of the windows above. "Oh, for the love of..." Phantom's eyes flashed, before twin beams of energy flew out and cut the robot in half. "You guys don't know when to quit." "Not that I mind. Being around living people sure untied his tongue." The street was quickly becoming a junkyard with a multitude of arriving bots. Danny saw how some contestants were already out of juice, and that certainly bode trouble for them. They got sloppy, exhausted even though barely half of the time had passed. If Present Mike's calls to the audience were anything to go by, Danny's instincts decided to kick in, and between casually slaying the robots, he kept an eye on others. It appeared that the redhead was having the same idea, which made the latter task all the more easier. The teen wondered if there was something to the exam that he was missing. Certainly for most people, killing bots was not going to cut it to the maximum result. "That guy sure looks like he may need help, Red," Danny said to the girl, before flicking his finger at the one-pointer that attacked him. The attack crushed the metal contraption to pieces. The shocked examinee girl stared at the display, but snapped out of it. She looked at the down-trembling boy, the one Phantom pointed towards, and nodded. "Please cover me," she told him. Not afraid of me taking your points. I can live without a couple. As the girl ran forward, Danny could only smirk. He saw more robots coming Red's way, and while she could take 1 pointers easily, a scorpion could pose a problem. Phantom fired an ectoblast at the machine, before another barrier appeared behind the Hafa. The 1 pointer hit the green wall, before it suddenly grew spikes and pierced the machine. Thought I forgot about you, Phantom said and dissolved the wall. Then he felt a pang in his core. Grabbing his chest, the teen cursed. Damn it, looks I am being wasteful, too, he chuckled. A 3-course meal doesn't cut it either, huh? He needed more proper ectoplasm to properly function. Energy could not come from just anywhere. He could neglect the Raymond Lindemann law, but it still could not be enough. The half-ghost would still go for long enough to complete the test, but he could only guess for how long he could actually keep that up. Phantom shook his head and looked back at the other examinees. The redhead really was getting into this, trying to save as many as she could. Danny thought it was admirable that she dedicated her precious time to this. It made all the sense in a world, given what kind of school they all wanted to get in. Snapping into action, Phantom bolted forward, deciding to put his power to a better use. At the last second he snatched the trembling tiny kid and pushed him away from a 3-pointer's pummel strike. The kid fell on his knees, his face full of tears. Thank you so much, he shouted and bowed his head on the ground rigorously. Danny put up a shield around him, protecting the examinee from another strike. Then the Hafa blasted the 1-pointer away. Don't just stand here. Phantom raised his voice and dissolved the barrier. If you need to take a breath, then retreat. Aye, watch out. Danny spun around and grabbed the attacking 3-pointer's hand. Using his free palm, Phantom made a swiping motion, and the crescent-shaped charge of ectoenergy blasted the machine away. You were saying? Danny smirked as the energy dissipated between his fingers. The boy with strange puffy hair gulped. You are right. I need to hide. That's not what I... But before he could finish the sentence, the boy ran off at a speed that could probably outpace a 1-pointer. And those guys had wheels for legs. Danny sighed, going off to finish off the 3-pointer before moving further. Meanwhile, inside a special monitor room, the paw of one particular white-furred person reached for a large, glowing red button. After melting the face of the biggest robot, Danny mentally added more points to his counter. Phantom also wondered how well Kirishima and Mina were doing. His arrogant side said that clearly not as well as him, but it didn't stop him from worrying both for their safety and score. You done spacing out? The familiar redhead asked him. Oh, Danny looked at her and then around. The battle had died down by then, and many students were taking the time to take a breather. Where did the robots go? We probably crushed too many, the girl shrugged, but then her look turned thoughtful. Something's bugging me, though. What is it? Have you met the obstacle villain on your way here? Now that she mentioned it, he completely forgot about the 0-pointer. As he thought about this, both Phantom and the girl felt the ground vibrate. The distant noises grew closer, but so far there was no visual. Speak of the devil, Danny mumbled. You think it's the 0-pointer? Only one way to find out. There aren't any bots left here anyway. Need a lift? The girl nodded and took his hand, before Danny flew up. I'm Danny, by the way, he said on their way to the roof. Kendo Itsuka, nice to meet you, the girl said and looked at him. Why am I feeling so weird? Because you are near a handsome hero, Danny smirked. Actually, it's because I'm not carrying you. I just passed the flying power to you, he briefly explained, before suddenly something hit the building in front of them with such force that it came crashing down. The shattered glass would have harmed the two if not for the last second use of intangibility. The wall of dust prevented them from seeing the robot immediately, but Danny and Kendo finally landed on the nearest available roof. Phantom raised his hand and used telekinesis to push away the dust. The two of them were then faced with a myriad of gigantic crimson lights, the eyes of the newest machine. The colossal size of the robot could instill terror in many, for it took Danny reaching the top of a multi-story building just to look that thing in the eye. The green machine ignored the two teens, choosing instead to move down the road, towards a larger group of students. Phantom turned to the side, seeing that Kendo was just as shocked as he was, if not more. That's our obstacle, she asked. His head kinda looks like a printer cartridge. Is this what you are thinking about? The girl asked incredulously. Hey, we don't need to break this thing, remember? Danny argued. Just avoiding it should be enough. He trailed off, looking at the students far away. Although the guys down there are less fortunate. Gonna join and try to help. We have no choice. The girl cracked her knuckles. You'll assist me, right? Danny sighed dramatically. The half-ghost still had the time to go for proper faux villains and earn himself even more points. There was certainly going to be less competition. And yet, he could not go against his nature. There were people in need of saving. Even if nobody was going to die that day, that robot could cause some severe harm. The fate actually was playing a trick on him, he realized. The very cause of his doubts and guilt reappeared. He could go for points, run away once more for his own self-benefit like he escaped Amity Park, his responsibility to protect the people of his town. Or he could prove to himself and all others that he was not a coward. I would not run away anymore, Danny whispered inaudibly, clenching his fists and turning to Kendo. You ain't getting off this roof without me, anyway. Again he took the girl's hand, before both of them started quickly flying towards the robot. We really need a plan. You are very flashy, you should distract it. I'll help the others get into safety. These dum-dums have no appreciation for my humor. Then just blast it, this should get its attention. Kendo shouted over the noise the machine created, before making her free fist larger. Throw me closer to the others. I can properly land. Your funeral, Red. Danny hoped he adjusted the strength just right. He spun together with the girl and threw her forward. Kendo flew right past the robot, using her enlarged hands to ease the fall. The diagonal trajectory also helped the girl land properly. Phantom saw her cleaning the debris, but he had no time to sit idle and watch. Charging a blast with both of his hands, he unleashed the green surge of energy at the side of the machine's head. With the laser lacking proper power, the robot only sustained a burn and a large enough dent. That guy's armor was something else. Hey, Rust Bucket, Danny shouted and clapped to get attention. Someone paid for all this stuff you broke. With a loud noise, the robot slowly turned its head to look at the teen again. Its spider eyes sized the half-ghost, covering him in red light. Phantom casually floated closer and tapped on its metal face. You are one big tin can. But I fought someone bigger. Down below, Kendo was too busy cleaning the debris. That robot was merciless to the cityscape first and foremost. Throwing another piece of concrete away, she managed to get a frightened girl from down below. Quick, find a safer spot. Don't stand in the way, the redhead called, before looking to the side. She was faced by a bizarre sight. There was a blonde boy who was neither tired nor scared. He was just out there. Like a bumbling idiot, he slowly walked around and snickered stupidly. His face, in the meantime, looked absolutely vacant. Kendo wondered if some student actually decided to attack a fellow examinee, but there was no time to find out. Looking up, she saw how the zero-pointer was continuously assaulted by lightning-fast attacks. Danny was keeping the robot from moving further, just as intended. Then, Kendo saw a pack of one-pointers coming their way. Not now, the redhead groaned. You there, the blonde one. Move or you will get harmed. But the guy was absolutely brain-dead and did not respond to any calls. Kendo was about to come to his rescue before she heard a loud, high-pitched scream. The next moment, she saw a barrage of purple squishy balls being thrown by the kid she had seen before, the one that had run off in terror. Kendo looked at the road now lined with the balls that the boy was ripping from his hair and frantically throwing. The one-pointers rolled right on them, but appeared to be glued to them. Thrown off balance, they tripped and fell one after another. Finish them off, the tiny boy screamed. Kendo didn't need to be told twice. With a swift move of her fist she smashed them, one after another, careful not to stick to the balls herself. Appreciate the assistance, Kendo looked at the boy, who was ogling her, and not in a good way. More like a very indecent one. Great, he was one of those. Can you guide this one away from here? She pointed at the brain-dead boy. He can walk. Probably. Why, yeah. The boy saluted. What about you? I'd feel bad leaving that guy alone. Kendo pointed at Phantom. Danny turned intangible and avoided the swing of the enormous hand of the robot. The half-ghost fired another blast, still realizing the futility of that attack. The bastard had too many layers of armor. That much he could see from the holes he made by continuously punching the machine. After piercing one layer, the energy of the blasts then spread throughout the next one. Danny had to put out more energy to actually harm it. Phantom looked back and saw the redhead giving him thumbs up. So, everyone managed to escape the robot's onslaught. And now they are probably earning more points. Danny mumbled and stretched his muscles. Alright, big guy. Now you ain't gonna kill anyone when you fall. He charged a much bigger blast than before, also letting go of his flight. Thus, the next beam of green light not only chopped off a part of the robot's neck, but also launched the half backwards and downwards, towards his redhead companion. The teen stopped the blast and slid across the ground without falling, coming to a halt right by Kendo. Hello there, he smirked. How much time do we have left? Present Mike just said we have 1 minute remaining. Danny's look turned thoughtful. How many points do you have? I think, with these ones it will be 27. Why do you ask? Then go. You can still earn more. And you? Hey, I can try to hold it off for longer. Maybe even break. This won't bring you any points. I am just that kind of a Samaritan. I lost my count at 60 a while ago. I'll be fine without the last minute. Wait, you hear that? Kendo looked where Danny was staring. To her horror, she saw that there was even more debris, and she had missed a student crying for help. For hero examinees, you guys sure get in trouble a lot, Danny mumbled, running towards the debris. Kendo followed right after him, seeing the robot come closer. Phantom swiped his hand, and the debris was cleared in an instant. The Halfa picked the student and wrapped the teen's hand around his shoulder. Can you walk? Danny asked. A bit, I think my leg is injured. Danny, Kendo exclaimed. At the last second, Phantom saw that the robot was going for a smash. He raised his hands and erected an ecto shield above his head. The teen fell on the ground again, but was caught by Kendo's palm. The redhead stared in shock at the half-ghost, who had met the hundreds of tons worth of pressure head-on. Danny's legs buckled. His teeth were gritted as he kept resisting the strike. Honestly, he breathed out. Do they want to get us killed? What are you waiting for? Kendo got the message, and even if she wanted to help, the best help she could give was to carry the injured from under the enormous palm of the robot. The second they were out, Danny turned intangible and let go. The force that had pent up during the strike made an impact with the ground, and the thunderous earthquake resonated throughout the area. Kendo and the student were launched away by the invisible force, landing only 100 meters away, rolling on the hard ground. When the robot lifted its palm, Phantom remained standing there, panting for breath his ghost form didn't need. All right, that was a good one, he muttered and smirked. Thank you for ridding us of extra audience. As Phantom spoke, he assumed a hard stance, his legs firmly on the ground. And now, for the grand finale. Taking a deep breath, Danny felt the enormous surge of power within him, trying to prematurely break free. He held it within, piling it up, before unleashing his most destructive power to date. The ghostly wail, a soul-freezing noise that held enormous destructive power. The ectoplasmic energy bounced across the sound waves, amplifying the damage tenfold and making those waves visible to a naked eye. Immediately the windows in 100 meters area shattered, and the unfortunate people in close vicinity had to cover their ears to hide from the deafening sounds. The main damage was being caused directly before Phantom's eyes. The asphalt was ripped off, the lampposts, cars and downed robots were launched away. The main recipient of the destructive power was the robot. The zero-pointer's attempt to stand the ground only made it worse, as it met the strike dead-on. Its armor was slowly being peeled off, and the screeching of metal joined the cacophony of noises. The robot could not attack, could not move any further. With a final strain, the head that was held by weakened neck joints was ripped off, flung hundreds of meters away. The zero-pointer was finally downed. The wail grew more and more quiet, before Danny finally stopped. The teen's legs betrayed him, and he fell on his knees, panting for air even harder. He could feel that he was left with too little energy, but with a desire to vomit. That was the longest he had ever kept the wail going. Through the temporary nausea, Danny heard the announcement of present mic. The time ran out. Slowly, Phantom got back to his feet, his legs still wobbly. He still had it in himself to slowly float forward towards the exit. Danny decided that his results were satisfactory, perhaps even incredible. What he knew for certain is that he did everything he could. Eventually, he came across Kendo, who ran up to him with a worried expression. Danny, are you all right? What was that? She bombarded him with questions. Well, the ghostly wail is more powerful than I remember. Danny gave a strained smile. Feel like vomiting on your shoes. My head is killing me and I'm not sure where I'm going. Which way is the exit again? Why did you even do that? Old man wanted to know everything I'm capable of, so I am showing just that. Don't worry, I'll probably be fine by the time we reach the exit. The after effects are temporary. You got any points? No. You mean to tell me it was all in vain? Danny asked dramatically. Woe upon me. Well, you are good enough to joke around. The two of them eventually made it to exit. Somewhere along the way, Danny did feel better and just in time. His ghost form gave up, reverting him to the human one. Kendo sure was surprised, but she knew that the teen was in no condition to talk. The Halfa still had a splitting headache, but at least he could walk. They talked again only once they left the cityscape area. Well, I guess that's it, Kendo mumbled. I hope you pass. You probably did better than anyone out there. I did, Danny said without a shred of humility. I hope you get in, too. Maybe you didn't destroy as many bad guys. He smirked, but you sure are nagging enough to be a hero. Kendo gave him a deadpan look, before snorting. Well, see you around, Danny said and saluted her. I still have to get my free lunch. Bye. Phantom began searching for Mina and Kirishima, but not without calling Tsukachi first. Diligently informing his guardian about his exam, He also told the man that he was going to have lunch with some new people he met. And of course, the detective sounded extremely happy that Danny met some of his peers. Tsukachi didn't want to discuss the event in details over the phone, especially since he was busy at work. But Danny would have to do some explaining in the evening. Putting the phone back in his pocket, the teen took another look at the distant glass building of UA Academy. That was a major step on the teen's hero path, and whether he was going upward or running around in circles remained to be seen. The grading process right after the famed UA entrance exam was a tedious one, more so than one could imagine. People expected a lot from the staff comprised of heroes, but when it came to red tape and teacher responsibilities, they were only human. That year there were hundreds upon hundreds of hopefuls, each in need of proper assessment, so the school staff certainly had their hands full for the duration of the following week. There were methods to ease the burden placed upon the teachers. For one, the written part, perhaps the most tedious and time-consuming part of the exam, was checked by a computer. The soulless machine could easily check the soulless tests and provide the staff with results, going as far as arranging them in proper order, judging by the amount of points the kids scored. As for the practical, that part demanded human touch. Danny turned out to be half right in his guesses about the grading methods, even if he didn't know that. A special division of workers utilized the latest face recognition technologies, the cameras all around the cityscapes, and the recording the robots themselves were making up to the moments of their deaths, and managed to do the simplest counting. However, there was also the part that no students knew about. The practical test had two criteria. One was already mentioned and it involved beating the robots. The other was more discreet, for that was also a test of hero qualities, too. The kids had to show not only their prowess in combat, but also how they viewed the world around them, if they had the internal strength, courage, and selflessness expected of a proper hero. Machine could not be the judge of that, neither could the simple clerks and operators that counted the rest of the exam. That was the primary task of the teaching staff, to hand out the points based on the strength of character, or to withhold those for a multitude of reasons. They didn't go into it blindly, however. The teachers already had the names of some students with impressive record on their mind and written down. They were monitoring the exam as it went, through the cameras, in hopes of seeking out promising heroes. It was also quite entertaining, if one were to ask. Such method was crude, because the teachers physically could not observe every student at once. It was more of a prelude to the real assessment. When the initial impressions died down, they would dedicate the entire following week saving the student's final grade with their extra bonus, which sometimes was quite high. In the morning of the day after the exam, the top teachers of UA gathered in the conference room. The one to officially announce the start of the hard working day was the principal of the elite school. He wasn't someone you would expect to be in charge of such establishment, appearance-wise. Principal Nezu was a short animal, a rare case of someone but humans manifesting a quirk. The white-furred individual in formal clothes was an intriguing cross between a mouse and a small bear. Coughing lightly, he folded his paws and smiled. "Good morning, everyone. I know some of you may be a little tired after the hectic day before, but the week in front of us will be just as, if not more difficult. We have a long list of excellent hopefuls this year. Many of them show promise, but of course not everyone will make it, as much as we might want that. So once again I humbly ask you to make this difficult decision." "Yeah." President Mike leaned back in his seat and crossed his legs. "Whose hopes do you want to mercilessly crush?" he asked sarcastically, noticing several looks. Hey. It's not like we do it without a reason." "He is right, isn't he?" said a luscious-looking woman in white and black suit. "Midnight. Some just turn out to be less promising than others." "It still came off a bit harsh," calmly pointed out the walking slab of cement under the meaningful name Cementos. "Let's just move on, all right." "Sheesh." President Mike gave up. "Sorry, Nezu-sama. Do go on." "There isn't much left to say," the principal chuckled, before turning serious. "But I understand that the subjectivity of our grades may come off as something malicious. However, it shouldn't affect how we grade those kids. These are the future generation of heroes, and we must accept this task with all the responsibility." A multitude of agreeing nods was his answer, and Nezu beamed again. "All right, let us begin, shall we? As usual, we should first hear out your suggestions before becoming more systematic." "Well, I pass." The loudmouth hero Mike raised his hands. "Couldn't really watch everything from my spot as usual." Nezu took a glance at the hero sitting to his left. It was hard to miss the 2 meters tall blonde giant, clad in his world-renowned suit. Toshinori Yagi, also known as All Might, was the most recent addition to the staff. The ever-smiling Colossus observed the rest of the staff, waiting for someone to step up in his stead. Select few people knew that it wasn't because he didn't see any aspiring heroes. In fact, Nezu knew about at least one such individual. However, knowing All Might, he probably didn't want to appear biased in favor of his future successor. The hero wished to let others be the judge of his recent protégé. It didn't mean he couldn't bring the boy up, though. Nezu decided to lend the man a helping hand. "I'd like to be the first one, if nobody has objections," said the principal. The rest of the staff was willing to let Nezu begin. Pressing the keys on the keyboard near him, the principal spoke up. "As you all know, we have 0 pointers there for a reason. To put the kids in a situation they cannot hope to win and see what they would do. This year, however, 2 of our executors were decimated." All Might looked at the principal, and albeit his eyes were sometimes hard to make out from under the shadows that seemed to always be present in proper spots, Nezu was sure that the hero appreciated what he was doing. "Eh?" asked Present Mike, before a look of realization appeared on his face. "So that's what that noise was." "Perhaps so. Let's bring up the first recording," said Nezu and tapped on the special panel. A large screen emerged from the ceiling at the opposite end of the room, allowing everyone to see the first case. The principal took the file that had been lying by his side and opened it. The screen in the meantime displayed a boy who was a bit on the shorter side, with fluffy green hair and face full of freckles. And as the screen showed him desperately running around the cityscape, Nezu began to read. Midoriya Izuku, age 15. His academic performance is very impressive, I must point out. His previous school has only positives to say about him, and young Midoriya also scored 90 points during the written exam. He isn't much to look at in the field, though, pointed out Snipe, a hero clad in cowboy getup and a gas mask. He hasn't attacked a single robot. How many points did he score from that one? Nezu sighed, throwing a glance at All Might. Was it sweat on his forehead? 0. The answer seemed to surprise the staff. Present Mike looked at his close friend that sat nearby, and he heard Aizawa mumble something about how ludicrous the test was. Eraserhead was indeed always opposed to how the exams worked, and the gloomy man wasn't alone in his sentiment. Present Mike wasn't sure if he agreed with his friend on that one, but for all his loud behavior, he tended to avoid that kind of debates. Something didn't add up, however. How did the kid destroy a 0-pointer, then? If he can't beat the weakest of them all, the blonde radio host, hero, teacher asked. It's not that he can't, at least from the given footage, responded Cementos. He just doesn't attack. What is his quirk? How about we move to the most interesting part and see? All eyes turned to All Might, who finally decided to speak. Nezu knew the reason behind his sudden enthusiasm, too. The #1 hero wished to keep his most cherished secret hidden, and it was the secret of his own quirk. The boy they were currently observing was to inherit it, too, but it was something strictly confidential, something only his closest confidants had knowledge of. Unfortunately, many members of the staff were not one of those yet. Thus, it was better to make them see the use of one for all and presume it was plain super strength. Nezu moved the recording closer to the end, where they could see the main part of the boy's exam. The gigantic machine was downed in but a single punch young Midoriya made. The sudden display of strength surprised the teacher, and what was even more surprising, the boy did not become a pancake upon hitting the ground thanks to the aid of another girl. The surprise lied in how injured the boy appeared after making that one strike. Just one hit, huh? Mike looked over his glasses. That's not something easy to do. But take a look at his injuries, said Midnight. This cannot be healthy. It appears that he still has no control over his ability, Snipe pointed out. It's not like we can't fix that, but if his quirk is incompatible with his body, we don't have any restrictions on those, mumbled Aizawa. Even so, that boy was foolishly reckless. Had the time not run out soon after, in a real fight, he would become a deadweight and liability to other heroes. Nobody was surprised to hear that from Eraserhead. He was known for being extremely demanding of his students and, by extension, potential students. Aizawa watched the screen, and his usually apathetic face did not give away any of his feelings, and what he felt about the boy was already voiced somewhat. Come on, Shota, Present Mike nudged him lightly. This isn't a real fight, right? How do we know he won't do the same when it is? Aizawa looked at the blonde. Snipe raised his hand. I second Aizawa-san on this one. But this what this school is all about, is it not? Asked Midnight. If anything, we can make kids like him learn. Her tone made the statement sound awfully like an innuendo of sorts. We aren't here to do all the work, Eraserhead responded. What we have is a boy who cannot use his quirk properly and who would rather waste his only chance on a 0-pointer. Nezu decided to interfere, moving the recording backwards. I think we should put it into perspective. Young Midoriya didn't do this as a show of vanity. He was trying to save a fellow examinee. When we add what Aizawa-san said, Midoriya used his only chance selflessly, trying to save those in need. We can't overlook this heroic act. Indeed, nodded Cementos. The bigger the potential loss, the more selfless his actions appear. With 0 points prior to that, he must have known he would get no other opportunity. To me it appeared like he was a lost puppy, said Aizawa, asking to move the recording further back. He was correct in some regard. After all, Midoriya was running around as the bots around him were destroyed. It wasn't his fault that others were too fast, but you don't get extra points for trying to break machines. Even so, when he got the chances, the boy didn't use his quirk on them. His reluctance resulted in the bots being destroyed by others. He did occasionally help others by carrying the wounded to the side of the road, but it didn't go anywhere beyond that. We don't judge by appearances, do we? Smirked Present Mike. We can see that the kid is selfless enough. At least in this department he passes as a future hero. Selflessness alone will not get you far, mumbled Aizawa. No arguing there, but I'm sure he'll learn. The kid is supposed to be a smart one, right? Asked Mike. His statement was received by a multitude of nods. Alright, then, let's put this to a vote, smiled Nezu. I believe that Midoriya Izuku's actions are worthy of 60 extra points. That's awfully generous, Aizawa complained, laying back in his seat. I just wish to compensate for 0 villain points. Nezu smiled innocently. Fine, have it your way. Everyone in the room, save All Might, was aware what expected the green-haired boy in the man's class. It would be a proper compromise to pre-assign Midoriya to the man's class, if he would earn enough points to make a cut, that is. So, 60 points it was, the highly above average result for the practical. And that was done by harnessing extra points alone. Nezu could see the proud look on All Might's face. The principal didn't assign so many points because the boy was to be the man's successor. Their school valued valorous children a lot, and it was no small deal what the boy did. Who is going to suggest the next candidate to discuss? Unexpectedly for all, it was Aizawa who raised his hand. Aizawa-san, asked Midnight in surprise. Now that's rare to see you impressed with someone. Don't mistake it for awe, please. The hero rubbed his eyes. I was meaning to talk about the second destroyed robot. Ah, Nezu chuckled. That is to be expected. Aizawa opened the digital file, and the Caucasian raven-haired boy's photo stared at the teachers from the screen. My, quite a looker, aren't we? Midnight said quietly. Fenton Daniel, the man read aloud. His data is surprisingly abysmal. He presented no documents about middle school education, and he is obviously out of place here. Wait a second, said Mike, lowering his sunglasses. Isn't that the rowdy kid from the briefing? Yes, that's him, mumbled Aizawa. Furthermore, I was the one who arrested him 1 month ago. Several surprised gasps sounded around the room. What in the world? How did this happen? Asked Cementos. He was arrested by me for presumed involvement with an illegal workshop. I made sure to look into this. He was released the next day and presumed innocent. You caught him red-handed, though, didn't ya? Present Mike inquired. Yes, I did. However, it turned out that he didn't buy any upgrades. Rather, he sought to make one from materials he got from the shady traders. Since none of those details are illegal, Fenton got away scot-free. However, I am unsure about what followed. So I have a question for you, Nezu-sama. What's the deal with the boy? I can actually indulge your question, Aizawa-san. All Might bellowed, now having 0 reservations about giving comments. He is actually Detective Tsukachi's kid. What? The staff asked simultaneously. Nezu chuckled. All Might just worded it the wrong way. Young Fenton was actually adopted by Tsukachi-san. The detective enjoyed a good reputation in the hero community. He worked closely with many of them, and his list of solved crimes made many heroes pale in comparison. And thus, the mention of his name was more than enough for the teachers to pay close attention. The most surprise of them all was shown by Aizawa. Guess he is getting too old to hope for the usual way. Asked Midnight. You yourself are not exactly. The murderous look from the raven-haired woman was enough to make Cementos stop mid-sentence. All Might decided to continue. Tsukachi-san was ready to vouch for young Fenton. He spoke of the boy as someone kind and also extremely powerful. Back in America, young Fenton was also a vigilante, which means that he at least has the experience, too. Is this supposed to make us like him more? Asked Aizawa. We just made one kid pass for no discernible reason. I won't allow it again. Yeah, vigilantism is illegal everywhere. You of all people should have known that. All Might, Present Mike agreed. Tsukachi sent the request to the American services. The boy is not persecuted, All Might assured. What is he doing here of all places, anyway? Young Fenton was kicked out by his parents. His already neglectful parents resented him for having a quirk. Since then, the boy traveled around before being found by Aizawa-san and Tsukachi-san. The looks of sympathy appeared on the teachers' faces. "That's actually disheartening," said Cementos slowly. "A sad backstory is not enough." Aizawa appeared stern, but Mike could feel that the man was not fully sincere. "Certainly, but we should keep in mind other factors," All Might said and raised his finger. "The boy used to live on his own for a while. During that time, he didn't turn to the life of crime, like so many in his position would do. His past vigilante acts, while being worthy of punishment, speak about how the boy is willing to come to everyone's rescue. Young Fenton alone held the burden of a hero for a year, with no proper heroes in close vicinity to take the mantle. I say that this should amend the smaller transgressions your eyes, Aizawa-san." Eraserhead hummed thoughtfully, while Mike was the first to speak. "That's actually kinda cool. The kid actually got a first-hand experience, eh? How many villain points did he score?" Aizawa looked at his tablet. 92. Everyone's eyes once again went wide as saucers. At this point they probably shouldn't have been surprised. "That's actually the highest we've ever had, isn't it?" asked Midnight with a smile. "Even All Might never reached that high." The said hero raised his finger. "Having a powerful quirk is one thing. To have the experience and ability is another. I didn't have the latter at the time of my exam." "This sounds more like an excuse than a compliment," Aizawa responded sarcastically, making the blonde hero sweat drop. "He is still only 1 point above your result. It almost feels unfair. He has an advantage over everyone." "This test also falls in line with what vigilantes usually do," added Aizawa, wishing to make a jab at the exam itself. "Breaking stuff with no further regard. You can't get this far with a weak quirk either," said All Might. Present Mike looked over his friend's shoulder. "What's his quirk, anyway?" "It states here that it allows him to control ectoplasmic energy." At this, everyone turned towards the hero who previously had been silent. He wore a cloak that covered most of his body, the area over his torso, and the high collar resembling that of a double-breasted trench coat. Underneath this, he wore a skin-tight black bodysuit with a golden striped neck area, and a matching black helmet that covered his entire head, a jaw guard attached over his nose and around his jaw, and circular mufflers. "Interesting," said the hero named Ectoplasm. "So he uses the same energy I do. Now I am curious to see what he is capable of." I said that the document the nature of the boy's power. However, I am doubtful, and he wasn't the only one. All Might knew all too well that Tsukachi himself was unsure. "Why do you say so?" "I was perplexed by what he is able to do. If we watch it from the start." The recording was soon changed to show the now white-haired boy in the middle of the street. "He is clearly capable of flight, for one. Wait, what's with his looks? Apparently, he can change those, too," Aizawa said. "When I apprehended him, the boy looked this same way." "That's already 2 completely unrelated powers. How does he attack, though?" The following second, Phantom annihilated the 2-pointer with ice spikes. "Ice control, too," Aizawa pointed out nonchalantly. "And an interesting one. He actually made a weapon out of it." The following display surprised the teachers all the more. The blasts of energy, intangibility, immense physical strength, and all other powers of the half-ghost were noticed by the staff, and each time their reaction changed from impressed to concerned. It appeared surreal just what kind of a walking arsenal the boy was. Even All Might, who had previously been told about some powers, was baffled at what he was seeing. The young Fenton held immense strength within him. "The boy has a lot of control," said Ectoplasm. "You would expect such power to go haywire any second." "He also appears mindful of what's going on around him," Cementos noted. "It is clearly visible that the boy has prior experience." As a vigilante, Snipe reminded, "Being mindful and an illegal hero usually do not correlate. What bothers me is how he immediately left others and decided to go all alone." "Arrogance, as expected," Aizawa sighed. "Kids with strong quirks are always like this." He thought that he could do it all by himself. "Well," Aizawa glanced at present Mike. "As is the case with Midoriya, we have no guarantee that he won't go to do his own thing. Well, if he gets in, we'll make sure to remind him of that constantly." All Might laughed thunderously. I must say, he trailed off, seeing the teen dispatch one bot after another. When Tsukachi spoke of his strength, I didn't fully believe him, but this. How did Eraserhead even manage to subdue him? "I didn't," he responded to everyone's confused looks with a sigh. "My quirk also didn't work on him. This leads me to believe that the boy's quirk is a mutation type above everything. I can't just remove something essential from his body." "Well, that's just a cherry on top." Mike shook his head. "What kind of insane eugenics created our little monster here? This goes beyond just quirk marriages. Aside from that, his parents also appear to be quirkless," said All Might. "It looks more like Fenton has several, in fact. But that's impossible, right?" All Might knew for certain that it wasn't. But this just didn't make much sense. If his parents were quirkless, then he couldn't inherit those from them. and there were far too many. This left only later acquisition, and the term itself did not sit well with the number 1. But wait, if he is that strong and Aizawa's erasure doesn't work on him, then how did you make an arrest? The boy surrendered to me. All right. Why? Tsukachi said that it is due to young Fenton not wanting any trouble with the law, All Might explained. Since he was released, it would have caused more harm to run away. It was a wise and mature decision on his part, I must say. And now we are back to the beginning, said Ectoplasm. Do we want someone with such dubious reputation in our school? You sound like you already made up your mind, Cementos responded. Not exactly. There is no denying that the boy will make an exceptionally powerful hero, perhaps one of the strongest. But vigilantism, the attempt at illegal craftsmanship, even if he is not persecuted, it speaks volumes about what he is like. That's why Tsukachi-san wanted young Fenton to apply. All Might continued to be the ambassador of the detective's outlook. He has all the potential. Tsukachi-san trusts us to teach the boy about what is right and wrong in our society. We should pay close attention to the recording, Nezu interrupted the argument. As you can see, Fenton rushed to the aid of other students when he saw them being in trouble. And he is no stranger to cooperating, evidently. Instead of hoarding points, he helps strangers get theirs. That's quite admirable, and certainly unusual for a former vigilante. What about the 0-pointer? The recording was sped up in order for everyone to see the most intriguing part. Phantom cooperated with Kendo in order to save the most unfortunate students, which added a lot of points in the minds of the teachers. It was a wise course of action on the part of the 2 examinees, with each performing their part the best. They saw Phantom cause some damage to the machine, but it wasn't enough. He was obviously saving up the energy for later just in case. Where Midoriya rushed in and desperately gave his all, Danny actually thought one step ahead. After the unfortunate incident that almost resulted in kids being smashed, the teachers thought about lowering the aggressiveness of the machines in the future. And then, the teen demonstrated the most destructive of his powers. So that's what that noise was, Mike said with wide eyes. I repeat my question. What lab did this guy crawl out of? He actually can give you a run for your money, huh? Asked Midnight. I don't look like a squeezed sponge after I'm done, though. Present Mike crossed his hands and huffed. But this destructive potential, it is worrisome, mumbled Cementos. If used in a normal cityscape, he could end up killing the civilians. This is a different case than the last one, nodded the principal. If Midoriya put only himself in danger, this attack could be a threat to everyone. But just as before, we should keep this in mind and teach the boy about this, but we should not deduce the points because of hypotheticals. You say this like we have already accepted him, Nezu-sama, with the minimal amount of extra points, and he certainly earned more than that. Fenton earned the maximum possible score for the practical exam. His written test leaves a lot to be desired, but it is far from horrible. In the meantime, the result of the practical is so high that there is no room for doubt that he can already be accepted. All that's left is our own will. For the duration of the following week, the examinees were lying on a metaphorical bed of needles. Everyone was anxious about the results, and Danny was no exception. He could put up an upfront, pretending not to care, but on the inside he was worried. Tsukachi could sense as much. As the boy's guardian, he was obliged to reassure the teen. Danny refused to check the answers that he remembered, afraid to find out the horrible truth that he got them wrong. It would only make him more anxious, so the detective did not press. He himself was fairly confident that the boy would be accepted. Toshinori wouldn't tell him anything, bound by his professional obligation, so all what was left to the family of 2 was waiting. Tsukachi could find refuge in his work, but the detective was concerned for his charge. Thus, he strongly advised the teen to hang out with the new friends he made prior to the exam. Danny had little objection, and Mina and Kirishima were all for it, too. The half-ghost would have liked to invite Kendo as well, but unfortunately he forgot to get her number. He felt really stupid upon realizing that fact. Danny could only hope that they both made it into the school. That way they could cross paths again. Nonetheless, Danny was going to have his fun with the 2. It was his first time since coming to a new world actually hanging out with people his age. Tsukachi knew that that's what the teen needed, and he wasn't wrong. The 3 of them made gargantuan plans to visit quite a few places. The reason behind such ambitions: Phantom's ability to fly. It was Mina's idea, unsurprisingly. Both she and Kirishima were amazed by what Danny could do, albeit the latter was less enthusiastic at first. Because of the teen's power, he had to treat everyone to a food. Kirishima was as trusting when it came to announcing their results as he was ready to honor their deal. But everything passed quickly, and the sharp-toothed boy was just as excited to make Danny use his powers left and right. and Phantom was ready to indulge the students. Of course, future heroes would not engage in anything illegal, minus Phantom the pit fighter himself, but that was besides the point. They moved from one spot of the city to another as easily as taking a taxi, only without the extra stipulations and fees. Much quicker, too. Tsukachi gave the teen some allowance for his entertainment, but Danny also took some money from his winnings to spoil himself and his new friends a little. It was nothing extraordinary, an edible treat or attraction, so the detective wasn't going to get suspicious. And as they were sitting at a food court of an amusement park, Mina sighed contently after downing her cup with ice cream. "Gee, that is life," she said. "I feel ya," said Kirishima loudly, gulping the treat perhaps too quickly. "Careful, or you will." Danny didn't have the time to finish the sentence before Kirishima yelped in pain. Did a brain freeze. The half-ghost and Mina laughed at the unfortunate student. Kirishima only huffed afterwards. "So, where do you guys want to go next?" asked Mina. "Cinema would be cool. A bit too much for one day, don't you think?" Danny said, putting a spoonful of ice cream in his mouth. "Hey, with your quirk we will be there in no time," Kirishima encouraged. "It's almost like teleportation." "I wouldn't go that far. I'm still learning it." The two students stared at him. "Wait, so there's more?" Danny smirked. "I'm still practicing." "Let's try your cup." The Hafa took Mina's empty cup and looked at the nearest garbage bin. "Now let's see if I can teleport it." The cup vanished from sight, before reappearing halfway towards the bin and falling on the floor. As Danny gave a deadpan look, his friends now laughed at him. Flicking the cup to the bin with telekinesis, the Hafa turned to them. "Yeah, there is still room for improvement." "That's still so manly," exclaimed Kirishima. "But is it still a ghost thing, though?" Mina looked up in thought. "You will be surprised by what they can do," smiled Phantom. "Although none of them are as versatile. They are mostly centered around one thing, like plants or food." "You sound like they are actually real." "Well, there are those among us that are on the fence." Danny smirked and gave a meaningful look to Kirishima. The latter had the feeling that the Hafa would rub that fact into his face until they died. "And yes, they are real. However, there is nothing supernatural about them, as I've come to learn. They are imprints left by a compilation of electronic charges of the brain and hormones. Ectoplasm in the air reacts to them and takes shape. There is no concrete proof that the ghosts are just mimicking the deceased person or it is the continuation of someone's consciousness. Some remember their lives, some don't, so it is hard to draw proper conclusions. It all comes down to the existence of a soul." Danny rambled with childish enthusiasm, so quickly that it was comical. "Fenton-san," Mina interrupted. "Sorry, we aren't getting any of that." "Oh," Danny blushed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry, I tend to get carried away." "You know a lot about ghosts, man," said Kirishima and grinned. "My hero name is Phantom. I am basically one of them, so it's only natural. Heck, I learned most of my abilities by watching them." "You guys believe me, right?" "Not that I've seen an actual one before," said Kirishima, once again exchanging glances with Phantom. "But it would be cool to see it." Danny resisted the urge to make a joke at the teen's expense. He had to admit that it was getting stale. Looking at Mina, he awaited her reaction. "I agree with Kirishima-kun, but Fenton-san, you actually managed to make ghosts sound boring." Danny appeared insulted at the statement, but then gave a small laugh. "You will change your mind if you see everything for yourself. I didn't think much of them before experiencing it all on my own." Suddenly the teen's phone began to ring. Excusing himself, Danny flipped it open and saw that it was Tsukachi calling. "Yeah." He answered the call. His friends could see his face change into that of surprise. "No way. I'll be right back." Danny closed his phone and sighed. "Sorry, guys, gotta go back home." "What is it?" "My letter arrived." Kirishima and Mina perked up at this. "Does that mean that ours will be there, too?" Danny shrugged. "Beats me. Need a lift, guys?" "No, thank you, Danny-san," Kirishima said. "You will have to fly around back and forth if you do." "Yeah, you should go," Mina beamed and gave a thumbs up. "Call us when you get accepted." "No room for doubt, eh?" Danny smiled and saluted his friends, before switching his forms and turning invisible. He bolted to the skies, reaching his apartment in a couple of minutes and phasing right through the windows of the living room. Appearing out of thin air, he once again startled the detective. Danny couldn't resist a small laugh as he floated in the air. "Gotcha again, old man," the half-ghost said. Tsukachi sighed. "You sure got here quickly. You flew through the city again, didn't you?" Danny dropped on the ground and turned into a human. "Come on, Tsukachi-san, cut me some slack. This is important, I need this." Deciding that he was right, the detective was willing to let it slide. The detective took the envelope from his pocket, handing it to the teen. Danny felt that it was heavy and bloated to contain only a list of paper. Tsukachi suggested to check the letter alone if he felt too anxious. Opting to refuse, Phantom ripped the envelope before a circular device fell on a kitchen table. Before anyone could react, it suddenly beeped. Soon after, the image of the beaming All Might flashed before them. Boom. I am here as a projection. He bellowed excitedly, so loud that even Danny jumped out of surprise. The Hafu was actually getting excited, but not as much about the #1 hero dressed in a yellow official suit, but rather about the device. Danny-san, put it back, said Tsukachi. The teen blinked at the detective, laughed sheepishly, and put the holographic device back on the table. Sorry, I just never saw a thing like it before. I think you accidentally paused it. You must have a lot of questions, young hero, so let me answer them right off the bat. All Might continued speaking, assuming his heroic poses all the while. First, the delay. We have been given much to deliberate on, so we apologize for that. Secondly, a question about me, no doubt. Not really, Danny said dryly. Get to the good part. The reason I am here is simple. I will be teaching at the UA this year, the man said and laughed. See, Danny. Tsukachi smiled. You will be taught by #1 hero. He tried to make the teen more excited about that part. I guess the guy is keeping the suspense for too long, the teen complained. His grade came before any sort of respect he held for the local heroes. It may have sounded rude, but if he didn't get in, the teaching staff would be the least of his concerns. Anyways, All Might finally stopped talking about himself. Fenton Daniel, we at the UA have evaluated your performance during the test. The hero pressed a button on the remote before the screens behind him began to show the footage. Tsukachi, who so far had no idea about how exactly the events transpired, watched in astonishment at the hordes of robots falling down before his adrenaline-filled ward. And the detective realized that back in the jewelry store the teen was holding back significantly. If the same move that broke a criminal's ribcage was enough to reduce a giant robot to pieces. I actually never noticed the cameras, Danny commented nonchalantly, completely oblivious to the detective's surprise. What? Oh, yes, it looks this way. What bothered the detective was the teen's expression when he crushed those robots. He was obviously enjoying that way too much. He was almost like a hungry cat that toyed with a mouse in its paws. The sharp teeth Phantom's ghost form had only added to the image. Let us move on, said All Might. In spite of the average result during the written exam, we at the UA have deemed your performance extraordinary. Danny couldn't resist a grin on his face. First time a teacher said this to me, he chuckled. In the beginning you have certainly displayed an unbecoming arrogance. All Might interrupted his bliss. Everyone's a critic. Danny's sudden mood swings were comical enough for Tsukachi to chuckle. However, the mastery of the quirk you possess is impossible to overlook. Already a versatile one, you have managed to get the most out of it, showing an impressive amount of control over your numerous abilities as well. Furthermore, we have not missed the proficiency and mindfulness you put into each of your attacks, as well as awareness about your surroundings most of the time. The amount of destroyed robots is astonishing, bringing you whole 92 points, the highest amount of villain points anyone ever scored. Danny whistled loudly, while Tsukachi's face was that of further shock. I deserve that free ramen, then, the teen smirked toothily. And that is not all. Aside from giving villain points, we also award hero points. Your actions in regards to your fellow examinees were taken note of as well. For being a hero is not just about beating the bad guys. Your selfless actions are what matters here. And you, young Fenton, have shown us multiple times that your heart is in the right place. As the footage began to show Phantom going to others' rescue alongside Kendo, All Might continued. For your actions we are awarding you with extra 8 points. Why so few, you may ask? Well, he bellowed, because with such bonus you have reached the maximum of 100 points for the practical, young Fenton. And this brings you to the top of the scoreboard. The displayed table showed Danny's name on top with whopping 100 points. The guy in the second place had 77 villain points and none for the rescue. The lead Phantom enjoyed was 23 points, and Danny couldn't help but grin. Not only at his result, but also the fact that Kirishima actually came third, almost reaching that bakugou fellow with a score of 74 overall. Kendo was there, too, in the 6th place. Phantom was still the winner, but the result really made Danny more happy that he met those two. They probably would get in, too. And even with your written exam leaving a lot of room for improvement, you have made it to the top of the entire exam scoreboard. All Might gave a thumbs up. Congratulations. It goes without saying that the doors of the UA High School are wide open for you, young Fenton. Welcome to Hero Academia. The recording stopped, but the silence remained. Tsukachi could still see that Danny was still shocked to find out just how well he actually scored overall. The top of the scoreboard. Danny couldn't believe what he had just heard. Never before could he imagine ever getting that high. It was one of the most elite schools around, and yet they were happy to accept him. That's a lot to take in, the teen mumbled, seeing the detective's bright smile. Tsukachi himself was joyous to find that out. The raven-haired man knew that he could not take credit for the boy scoring so many points, for the boy reached everything on his own. And yet, the feeling of enormous pride for his charge arose in his stomach. This just calls for a celebration, the man said, getting up from his chair. How about that, Danny? Yeah, that would be cool. The boy gave the detective a smile. I'm sorry, I need to do something first. You probably want to tell your friends first. I get it. Why the long face, though? Danny shook his head. Because I meant to call my sister first. In over a month, his phone was never used to its fullest. Phantom never had the courage to make a call. What would he tell her? That he was living in an abandoned shack, working for less than minimum wage. That he was later taking part in underground illegal fighting. Jazz would have flipped if she heard that. There was no need for her to know. Later he was too busy with preparations that each time he wanted to call, the teen was distracted. And, well, he didn't want to cause her pain if he didn't get in. But now he had something to actually be proud of, and she had to know that everything was all right. Jazz herself could not call him because of how interdimensional communication functioned. The only satellite in the form of the antenna was located back in Fenton Works, their home. It could only receive the signal from another existential plane and pass it around the human world Fenton knew all too well. By itself, the antenna could not find where to transmit the signal. But if the connection between the two phones was made, it could maintain the two-way call, at least as long as the conversation went. Tsukachi himself wasn't sure how to feel about the boy's course of action. He knew nothing of Danny's sister, and how she would act. The detective also feared that the therapy he was subtly putting the Hafa through was going to be undone if past connections play too much. Still, Tsukachi would never have the heart to sever those connections. Danny appeared to love his sibling a lot, so it really was nothing problematic. Giving into his curiosity, Tsukachi quietly stood near the door of Danny's room, wishing to hear what the two kids said. He knew English, so he wasn't concerned. Taking a deep sigh, Danny finally pressed the green button and put the phone to his ear. The spooky, yet embarrassingly childish built-in ringtone eventually fell silent, and the familiar voice sounded from another end. Danny, goodness, do you have any idea how worried I was? The shout was so loud that even Tsukachi heard it. We agreed that you call me as soon as possible. Hello, Jazz. Sorry for not calling earlier, Danny said calmly and smiled. I had a lot of things on my mind. A lot of things, my ass, geez. The teen blinked upon the profanity used by his rule-abiding sister. She really was concerned. Ignoring the pang of guilt, Danny went on as before. Come on, sis. I really mean it. I was just busy bringing my life together, you know. And so far, I think it's looking good. Tell me more, Jazz demanded firmly, not leaving any room for debates. For one, I am in Japan right now. Alright, why? Wolf wasn't picky about the exact location he took me to. Neither was I, but it's fine. You know I can speak the local language. Japan is not the best place around for a homeless adolescent, Danny. It has strict regulations, there are. Hear me out, you worrywart, Phantom chuckled. I'm fine. There was a guy who was willing to take me in. Works in the police, too. Something gives me clues about how you two met. And you won't be wrong. But Tsukachi is nice, isn't too nosy, but sometimes really pressing for answers. Can easily detect lies, too. Tsukachi's expression became neutral. So that's what he thought about him. Well, it wasn't bad. But what about your secret? Well, people around here really don't see anything bad about what I can do. I can walk around in any form and nobody would be bothered. That's one bizarre world. You tell me. Tsukachi helped me with some local papers, too. I see. Since you have the documents, you probably can apply to a school. I already did, Danny smirked. Just got the letter from the most elite school around. I got in with the top score. A moment of silence. Tsukachi couldn't help but notice how happy the teen was when talking to his sister. He sounded more enthusiastic than when the detective was near. Like he sought her approval and praise more so than Tsukachi's. Well, that much was expected. Danny, I understand that you don't want to make me worry. Jazz, I am serious. That's why I thought of calling you immediately. So you cheated. Jazz, I mean it. They happened to have a practical exam and I got the max score. It's a school for heroes, and I fought things much tougher than a couple of robots. Alright, now wind it back for a couple of seconds. A hero what now? You remember what Wolf said. I am not a white raven anymore. They train people with strong powers to become heroes. Wow, that's really convenient. You remembered what I said, didn't you? That you want me to continue being a hero. I am still on the fence about this school, but this is a good path to take even if I don't make it a full-time job, Danny chuckled. I promised you, sis. I will give it my all no matter what. Thank you, Danny, Jazz said quietly. Sighing, Danny continued. But how are you guys? Everyone misses you. Even mom and dad. They don't talk much to anyone now. Even to me. They just locked themselves up in the lab. Is it really that different from what they usually do? They spent more time in their basement than with us. Danny, please don't bring them up now. I already have to bear them each day. Alright, your call. The fact they aren't even looking for me says more than enough. After talking for nearly half an hour, Danny was finally done. His already high mood having improved significantly. The conversation with his sister was mostly a pleasant one. Jazz was still planning to submit her papers to Harvard, and Danny was confident that she would get in. He asked Jazz to give Tucker and Sam Fenton phones so that he could keep in touch with them, too. He also promised to call more frequently. Deep in his mind, Danny cherished the possibility to visit them when the time came. Tsukachi, who by then had decided to just leave the teen bee, was waiting for him in the living room. That was a lengthy talk, pointed out the detective. I didn't call her for a month, and she sometimes worries too much, Danny chuckled. She asked me about literally everything, from what I wear to how I spend my free time. That's why I care for her this much, though, he mumbled. You are very close, I see. I told you that before, didn't I? My mother gave no shit about me, so she filled in. Better than Maddie ever could. Well, you are lucky to have a sibling like that. In any case, I am planning to go to one place for celebration. Very posh, too. Danny smirked. Sounds good, old man. The half-ghost grumbled under his breath as he fixed the collar of his uniform. In his euphoria, he had forgotten that the Japanese students were obliged to wear their uniforms. Aside from simply enforcing discipline, it helped the police catch those who chose to ditch the school. They would just bring the kids back. Danny could care less about the reasons. He hated uniforms. They brought unpleasant memories. The uniform wasn't all that uncomfortable, despite all the drama Danny voiced multiple times. Comprised of a blazer with dark turquoise trimmings over a white dress shirt and dress pants, it wasn't limiting his movements or making him sweat bullets on that warm spring day. A red tie was also obligatory, and Danny managed to tie it only with Tsukachi's help. The detective was obviously amused by the teen's obliviousness. The second it came loose, that tie would go in his bag. However, by the time Danny made it to the school, the shirt came loose and was now sticking from under the blazer. Not that he even noticed. His attention was elsewhere. He had seen the UA already, but it was different now. Now he was a full-fledged student, and thus the glass structures appeared more imposing than inviting. You are just being a drama queen, Fenton, he told himself. Get a hold of yourself, don't start crumbling now. Talking to yourself, huh? Danny turned around, and to his joy, he saw that he wasn't alone. Kendo was there, wearing the same uniform, only it was the girl version, with a skirt. Never took you for a type, Danny-san, she smiled good-naturedly. I am actually a ticking bomb destined to destroy the world, Danny said, with the girl being unaware that it wasn't just a joke. Looks like we both made it here. Yep, I am actually amazed you got that high. She gave him a thumbs up with her slightly engorged hand. You are in top 10, too, Danny shrugged, before smirking. But yes, I am amazing. The redhead rolled her eyes. Figures the guy would be so full of himself. Well, as long as he wasn't an asshole about it. Kendo then noticed that Danny was still staring at the school building without moving forward an inch. What's the holdup? She asked him. Never mind, I am done ogling. Danny shook his shoulders and went forward. The surprised redhead had to pick up her pace in order to catch up to him. As she looked around, the girl didn't hide her continuing amazement at how pristine the place appeared. Suddenly she got a question to ask her companion. Say, Danny-san, what class did they put you into? That was a strange one, Danny began recollecting. The initial message had assigned me to Class B, but a couple of days ago they changed it. Oh, that stinks. That means we aren't gonna be in the same class. I'm in B. Why would they do it, though? My guess. Initially they probably wanted to keep me and another guy who busted a 0-pointer apart for the sake of balance. Wait, someone else broke that gorilla. Yep, my guardian knows someone from the staff, so he told me. That makes sense, Kendo noted. But then they decided to put you together. They must have thought that it would be better to keep an eye on you two when you are in the same class. Geez, that's unbalanced. That was my take on it, too. You make it sound like we will have to fight against each other, though. Who knows? Sport events always pit classes against each other. I figured it would be the same here. Practice makes perfect, they say. Looking forward to that day, then, Danny cackled evilly. Eventually, the 2-0F them split up, each going to their respective classrooms. The teen wished he could bump into Mina or Kirishima on his way there, but no such luck. Stopping near the doors of his classroom, the ones that had "wanna" written on them, Danny took another breath, feeling his social anxiety making a comeback. Getting acquainted with an entirely new company was stressful. Come on, Fenton, he thought to himself. You sweet-talked deadly criminals before, these are a bunch of kids your age. Yeah, a small voice in the back of his head said. But you can't blast them if need arises. That was a fair point, but he would not let it decide everything. Perhaps too strongly, Danny opened the door and stepped inside. Whatever shouting he had heard behind the door was gone once the teen entered. He cursed mentally. That was not the impression he had hoped to make. And immediately Fenton saw the person perhaps everyone around had seen even before school. Same dark blue hair, the glasses, it was the person responsible for getting Danny the moniker of a rowdy kid. The stickler guy himself. And from the look in the boy's eyes, Phantom could see that the recognition went both ways. And the half-ghost himself wasn't eager to share the room with the guy. Perhaps it went both ways, but the stickler didn't show it. The uncomfortable silence needed to be broken. And woe to him, Danny wasn't that imaginative. Yo, he said and smiled. That was all everyone needed to shift the atmosphere. To Danny's surprise, the stickler responded in kind. Greetings, he shouted across the room, closing the distance incredibly quickly and confidently, even if his movements were still robotic. Outstretching his hand, the boy continued to speak. I'm Ida Tenya. Fenton Danny, the Haffa took Ida's hand and shook it. The boy's bespectacled eyes widened in surprise. So you are the one who reached the top of the chart. I must admit I couldn't imagine someone like you getting that far. Danny's expression soured. Thank you for sincerity. Look, you just called me out in front of everyone at the auditorium. I didn't mean to be rude, but that's how it is. Let's put this behind us from the start. Wise words, as expected from someone who achieved such a high result. Let us leave that accident behind us. Phantom desperately looked around the class to search for his friends, hoping for them to join in, but no such luck. However, his gaze met another one full of murderous intent and hostility. A single kid with blonde hair had one of the most viscous looks Danny had seen, and he had faced his genocidal future self. Ida didn't seem to notice Danny's attempts to find an exit, continuing to talk at the high volumes. I sincerely hope we will become strong allies, even if I have to work hard to reach your level. Danny's face was growing red from being put at a stage in front of everyone. It's no big deal. We both are in top 10, man. You don't have to prove anything. Thank you for your kindness. Please, assume your seat. The class is about to start. And here Danny thought that the guy's excessive discipline was gone and done with. Well, as long as the incident back in the auditorium did not repeat, the Haffa was ready to bear with it. Ida obviously wasn't a stickler to the point of pushing away everyone with his nagging. As Ida went to his own seat, Danny turned his attention to the blonde. If he approached the guy, it would probably instigate an unneeded conflict. It almost felt like he was back in Casper. Danny dropped his backpack near the seat pre-assigned to him, a neat number 10. Deciding that the rest of the student body could be made acquaintance with later, the teen took out a small notepad from his back and began to scribble something on it. It was something he was working on a lot lately. Students had been asked to send their sketches of suits to the school, but Danny was having an extra issue. No matter what suit he asked for, it would be replaced by his normal one in the ghost form. Tried and tested many times before, Danny knew that his clothes could change according to his will, as they were the same part of his body as his hair or nails. But in order to make changes, he needed a clear concept. Danny was torn between two diametrically opposite ideas. He would have to try both of them out at some point. He was somewhat attached to his hazmat, no doubt, but there was no denying that it wasn't designed for combat. Danny needed that change. There was also the issue of technical upgrades. Fenton Sam. He suddenly heard Kirishima's voice. Hey, Kiri. Danny didn't finish his sentence as he looked up to face his friend. His initial shock was due to Kirishima having changed something about his appearance. The sharp-toothed boy had dyed his now spiky hair to the extremely bright red color. What's with the new hair? Danny asked. I asked the question too. Mina peeked from behind her friend. Hey there. I decided to get a new look, that's all. Kirishima grinned. A new school, a new look, a new me. The Haffa smiled enigmatically, tilting his head. And it has nothing to do with Crimson Riot whatsoever. Who? Asked Mina. He is my idol, Kirishima said excitedly. I'm glad you listened, Fenton Sam. Yeah, I strive to be at least half as good as him. I think it suits you. I agree. Mina nodded, grinning as well. I'm so glad we are all in the same class. It will make everything super easy. Can't argue with that logic. Very soon Mina separated from the two boys, eager to immediately make new friends. Kirishima and Danny conversed for some time, with the latter showing his friend the early concepts of his new suits. Huh, you still going with that demon lord joke? Danny shrugged. More like a ghost prince, actually. It's a bit outlandish, and it doesn't exactly represent who I am. Well, it does, but it's not the part I like a lot. I didn't get any of that. Kirishima scratched his temple before grinning brightly. And the other one? It's still in development. Nothing to show yet, but I plan on hitting some shops around for inspiration. Going with casual, I suppose. I only need my clothes to be comfortable and not slow down my movement. And if it does, it has to matter. Aren't you taking a bit too long with them, though? They told us to bring them before the semester started. I have an arrangement. Danny smiled. Don't worry about that one. As the teen flipped another page of his notepad, with the edge of his eye he saw another person entering the room. It was a thin, freckled boy, the first subject of the teacher's discussions. Izukumidoriya was the kid's name, but Danny didn't know that just yet. What he did know, however, is that Ida was about to give the kid one hell of a greeting, and Fenton was going to watch. It was always funny when things happened to others and not you. Greeting, I'm Ida Tenya, the bespectacled boy shouted, having met everyone in the classroom like this. I heard you before, the boy exclaimed and even jumped. He appeared very nervous talking to the guy. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Pleased to meet you, Ida-san. Danny probably needed to save the kid from further embarrassment. That's what he thought to himself. The half-ghost also wondered who among the students of this class was the one that took down the zero-pointer as well. And from the way Ida appeared just as awestruck, Danny could make a guess. If he remembered correctly, Izuku was in the top 10, but without any villain points. It checked up. Coughing slightly, the half-ghost gained their attention, once again having emerged out of nowhere, and startling both students. Ida-san, the start will start in a minute, he informed. Are you gonna scare everyone you meet, Fenton-san? Nina shouted across the room. It's not on purpose, Danny moaned dramatically and laughed. Wait, Fenton? Izuku asked, all but gaining stars in his eyes. As in, the one who got the maximum amount of points for the first time in 10 years. 10 years, huh? Danny rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, that's me. I'd say to just call me Danny, but you people don't do that most of the time, anyway. I so wanted to talk to you, the boy said excitedly. In order to beat Kaken with villain points and gain rescue points in the process, you must be really fast and strong. And you also took down a zero-pointer. Whoa, slow down there, Danny raised his palm. Hey, wouldn't you be the guy that took another one down? It was the boy's turn to blush and frantically wave his hands around. Why yeah, it's really not a big deal. I mean, after the punch I was out of commission. Punch? Danny raised an eyebrow and put a hand on his belt. As in, singular. As Izuku nodded, the halfer really felt impressed. Granted, Izuku made it sound like he was a glass cannon, but it was nonetheless worthy of respect. And how did you do that? I know you are the one that took a zero-pointer down, too. Danny smirked. I shouted at it. That got him several confused looks from the students. Izuku, however, seemed genuinely impressed. Shouted, does it mean that your quirk is sound related? But if so, how did you control it? Maybe you can actually control your waves to go the way you want. Is it something like Present Mike's quirk? Danny really was at a loss at how to stop the boy's mumbling. Glancing at Kirishima, who was laughing his ass off, the halfer rolled his eyes. Is this how I look when I ramble? He asked. Pretty much, Kirishima responded. The teen's savior entered the classroom soon, and she immediately noticed Midoriya. With a bright smile on her face, the girl with short brown hair came towards the conversing teens. You got in, she said happily, not looking away from Midoriya. The teen's frantic antics were a clear indication that he wasn't accustomed to conversations with the opposite sex. Not that Danny realized it. He was as clueless as ever when it came to this. Deciding to leave the two alone, Danny joined Kirishima near the latter's table. He saw the smirk forming on the red-haired boy's face. What are you smirking about? Danny asked. My boy is finally socializing. He pretended to wipe a tear. Oh, shut up, you walking brick. If you are here to socialize, then get out. That was the voice that Danny didn't expect to hear in his class at all. God, no. Turning towards the entrance, every student was greeted by a bizarre sight of a walking sleeping bag. From it, the face of Eraserhead was clearly visible. Danny's eyes widened and a quiet curse escaped his lips. The universe hated him. All universes did. He should have known. That guy was a teacher at that school. They were bound to cross eventually. It took 8 seconds for you to quiet down. He muttered, "Time is a precious resource. You lot aren't very rational, are you?" "Jesus H. Christ," Danny mumbled in English. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota," the man declared, sounding as tired as ever. "It's a pleasure to meet you." The sleeping bag was definitely new. Danny wondered how the man always looked so tired if he didn't get out of bed. Literally, he was mostly concerned about the brief look the man gave him. A look full of suspicion. Something told Danny that his time with a new teacher was going to have a rough start. "Quickly now," the teacher said, waving the colorful gym uniform that he had fished out of the bag. "Change into your gym clothes and head out to the grounds. We're seeing just how far you can get with your quirks. Or maybe not rough." This part remained to be seen. When Aizawa announced what the kids would be doing during the lesson, Danny was honestly kind of excited. He had all the reasons to be. This was a test of skills, quirk apprehension test. And as long as Phantom was able to do what he excelled at, he was more than happy to participate. There was a part of him that wished to flaunt his powers in front of his classmates, like a kid that brought McDonald's food to school. But it was mostly an easy grade that tempted him. However, as their homeroom teacher started explaining what they were going to go through, Danny's enthusiasm took a dive. From the description, it appeared like a normal PE session. The gym uniform they were all now wearing should have given him a hint. But Danny hadn't thought about it too much. The entire class gathered outside, on the special prepared ground, ready to face whatever Aizawa had in mind. Well, mostly ready. To his surprise, Danny noticed the purple-haired shorty that he had rescued during the exam. The guy was shaking just as before. How he got in was a question the teen wasn't eager to ask. Danny really didn't want to antagonize any of his classmates. His thoughts were also on their recently revealed homeroom teacher. Once the initial thoughts of him being the unluckiest person subsided, Danny began to wonder how he was going to coexist with the man that did not appear friendly at all. And boy, had he given him an opportunity to dislike the half-ghost from the start. The teen hoped that he wasn't that kind of a teacher. What about the entrance ceremony? The brown-haired girl nervously called out to the teacher. The same girl that had made Midoriya blush like crazy. Or guidance sessions. "No time to waste on that stuff if you want to become heroes," Aizawa responded instantaneously, obviously having anticipated such questions. So, he was a man of action. Danny liked that. He would take that over the boring ceremonies at any time. Still, something was amiss, and the teacher was soon reminded that being absent from ceremonies like this was fraught with terrible consequences. To this, Aizawa had an answer as well. "The school is aware of my methods. The UA is known for its creative approach and its own education system. This applies to teachers as well. The entrance exam is a futile attempt at discerning at least some level of skill. However, it is too rudimentary, too basic, and thus unimportant. This is what truly matters." The way the man looked down upon the exam probably meant that Danny's result was not going to affect the teacher's attitude towards him whatsoever. Still, the teen was somewhat assured by the fact that an elite school was placing enormous trust in that man. They had standards and world-renowned status, too valuable of a resource to be wasted by even one incompetent teacher. Danny just didn't want the hero school to become another Casper High. "We will be running the usual tests you did in middle school, dash, softball throw, grip strength, things like these. The government is not in a hurry to change anything, and the schools nowadays still do not allow the use of quirks during such tests. I believe this to be irrational." As the man explained it, his eyes deadlocked on one particular raven-haired teen. "Fenton," he called, and Danny just knew it would be him being called out. Whether it was because of his own outstanding results or personal dislike, the teen did not know. "How far could you throw a ball back then? I presume you did go to one, correct?" "That was just unnecessary," Danny mumbled, stepping forward. 30-ish, I think." He heard and saw how the blonde kid snorted. Danny had to admit, his human form wasn't nearly as strong. But it's not like he could use what little he had during the classes, lest the people of Amity talked about the strange Fenton kid even more. Aizawa tossed Danny the ball, which he caught with ease. The teen really wished he could understand what the man was thinking. But his face was totally apathetic. "Now throw it. Do whatever you want with your quirk as long as you don't leave the circle. Have a go." Danny thought about it for a moment, wondering how to best approach the situation. Meanwhile, Kirishima and Mina were getting excited. They never got to see their friend do anything flashy. "You think he will do it?" Kirishima asked. "I dunno," the pink-skinned girl shrugged. "It would be really cool." "Do what?" Midoriya immediately came up to them, eager to learn about his strongest classmate. Kirishima grinned. "Fenton-san can make himself super powerful. It's like his ultra-manly mode. And he also can do so much more with it." Mina added. "I see." Midoriya mumbled as he started writing down something in a journal he had seeming taken out of Etha. "I can hear you, guys," Danny smirked, before finally turning to the line before him. It ended at 100 meters. He was going to aim higher. Just remember how they do it in baseball, he told himself, before realizing he never even properly watched a match, let alone never played one. He would just have to throw. His right hand was suddenly engulfed in the faint whirlwind of ectoenergy, which appeared as a mix of green flames, smoke, and single sparks. And Midoriya started taking down the notes as quickly as he could. By imbuing his limbs with power, Danny made them many times stronger even without him going ghost. Coupled with the full strength of his human form, all of this was bound to get him result. Danny readied for the throw, his blue eyes turning green. And then the ball was launched. With a loud wheezing sound it flew forward, and the force of the throw was enough to blow everyone's hair. The ball flew over the treetops, and obviously out of school grounds whatsoever, which made the rest of the students watch the half-a in awe. Danny smiled and pulled his hair back. He was beginning to like all that attention. 702.31 meters, Aizawa spoke after looking at his phone. Really, Danny didn't seem satisfied with the result. Gotta be the lousy throw, he muttered to himself. The teacher only pointed towards the rest of the students, obviously not wishing to comment on it just yet. There was nothing new to Aizawa. If anything, he expected the teen to exceed the actual distance. From what the boy's friends had already said, it could only be theorized that they were referring to the teen's white-haired persona. Eraser had made a mental point that the boy wasn't as strong like this, but examining him was not why Danny was summoned forward. During the brief moment of Aizawa's contemplation, Phantom rejoined the rest of the students. "Whoa, Fenton-san," Hiroshima exclaimed. "You threw it so far away. That's so manly." "Why, thank you, dearest friend." Danny put a hand on his chest, before seeing Midoriya come up to him. "That was amazing. What kind of energy did you use back then? How did it help you throw the ball? And what was that light?" "Shut up already, nerd," the blonde menace of a teen shouted at them, visibly scaring the curious kid. "You are giving me a headache. Tell you later." Danny winked at the green-haired boy, before turning to Aizawa. "That sure looks fun, teach." "Fun?" the teacher asked slowly, as the cheerful atmosphere around was mercilessly murdered by him. "Is this what it is to you?" Danny blinked and shrugged. "Among other things, it sure ain't boring. You all are hoping to become heroes in 3 years. If you think that it's all fun and games, then you can be already shown the door." Danny didn't appear offset by the man's threatening aura. "We are outside," he jested without really meaning it. "Really though, we are not in a life-threatening situation at the moment, Aizawa-sensei." His classmates blinked. Had their teacher told them his name already? No. Everyone could swear there was a glint of emotion in Aizawa's eyes. "It seems I have neglected to mention that the one who scores the lowest in this class will be deemed as hopeless and immediately expelled." That statement caused a round of shocked gasps and exclamations among the students. Danny himself knew that it wasn't because of him, but because that was Eraserhead's method. The man must have known that Phantom was not going to get the lowest score, so it couldn't be some personal spite. It was a very cruel attempt at a wake-up call, threatening kids with expulsion on their very first day. Aizawa in general seemed like a man who always meant serious business, his sleeping bag and the middle bag aside. With his constant lack of said seriousness, Danny knew they would be at odds on more than one occasion. And yet, the teen could understand those actions. Didn't mean he was going to take it the way Aizawa wanted. The lowest score will be expelled. The same brown-haired girl, Uraraka, of whom Danny learned the name from Mina, tried to confirm if everyone had heard correctly. "It's only the first day. I mean, even if it weren't, that's totally unfair." Whatever reaction the girl expected, she received almost none. Not a flash of sympathy was present in the man's tired eyes. Natural disasters, highway pileups, rampaging villains. Calamity is always right around the corner. I'd say Japan is full of unfair things. Heroes are the ones who correct all that unfairness. If you expected to waste your time on pointless theories and spend your evenings on leisure, then I'm about to disappoint you. Me personally and the UA will run you through the ringer. That's plus ultra. Use your strength to overcome it all. Aizawa flashed a tiny smile. "So bring it." Hiroshima in the meantime looked at his thoughtful friend. "Fenton-san, you are not spacing out, are you?" he whispered. "Nope," Danny said. "I just thought about what he said. The teach is right. The bad guys ain't gonna sit around and wait for you. Sometimes they even come at you while you sleep." And how the teen hated when they did that. "How would you know?" The redhead scratched his temple. In response, the half-ghost only gave an enigmatic smile. "It really shouldn't be that bad, Kirishima-san. Just focus on not coming last," he said, before a smirk crossed his features. "It's all about physical, eh? You might actually stand a chance against me." "You bet," Kirishima fist pumped. Phantom knew that the classmates had to remember the consequences of their failure, but it didn't mean that he would not try and cheer everyone up. That's just who he was, an always upbeat teen that laughed in the face of the ghostly tyrant pariah himself. Danny wanted to be known as someone like this, not as a delinquent, even among his classmates. What he most certainly didn't want to come across as was someone who looked down on his peers and always knew what was better for them, albeit he had the field experience and mastery of his power that was hard to match at the time. He knew what that feeling of intrusion was like. So, for now, let them themselves come to him if they so wanted, and he would do his best to push away the sentiment of uncertainty. At the time, he simply needed to show them that he was both approachable and powerful to give such advices. That was the decision he made before setting out with others, preparing for the first proper test among many. And the first test in line was a 50-meter dash. Whether to save time or to more easily assess the performance, the kids were going to be split into pairs. There were some interesting groups, and Danny couldn't help but pity Midoriya. Katsuki Bakugou, the mean blonde that so far spoke only by shouting at people, was especially hateful towards two people in the class, Fenton and the one he was currently going to face. Those two seemed to know each other, Danny reasoned. The lot also decided that he was going to face his most recent acquaintance Ida. The bespectacled boy appeared jovial upon learning this. Danny himself approached him with a smile on his face, and yet it was Ida who spoke first. "Fenton-san," he called, his moves just as quick and robotic. "I am glad that I am getting a chance to face the top scorer so soon. You don't have to be so formal with me." "Ida-san," Danny raised his hands slowly. "Let's both do our best." "Thank you for your openness, Fenton-san." Ida bowed his head. "If I may ask, can you boost all of your limbs?" "Never did this for running quickly. Usually those were kicks or high jumps. Too much energy, and each step will turn into a jump, or my limb will burst. There is a limit to how much a human body can handle." "What about your quirk?" Ida sat on the bench nearby and crossed his legs. Only now Danny saw something, and it made his eyes go wide with surprise. On his surprisingly ripped calves, Phantom could see exhaust pipes, 6 on each leg. "Wow, that's certainly unique." "Thank you for your compliment, Fenton-san. My quirk engine gives me an excellent speed boost." "I see." Danny put a hand on his chin. "I guess you fight with legs, too." "You guessed correctly," Ida said, before seeing how the half-ghost began to laugh. "What did I say, Fenton-san?" "No, it's not that. It's just that of all the people I am running against a guy with car engines in his legs." "Eh, just my luck," the half-a smirked. "I am sure you can achieve great speeds. Otherwise you would not have been so quick to dispatch villains and save bystanders during the exam." "Huh, the guess is on point." "Well, the teach did say do whatever you want with your quirk." Danny parodied the teacher's gloomy tone and voice. "Yes, you are free to do that." Danny felt the color drain from his face. Glancing over his shoulder, the teen saw Aizawa standing behind him. "Hey, teach," the half-a said slowly. Aizawa sighed and pointed towards the running track. "Get in line, you two go first." "Again?" Danny asked in confusion. "Since you know what sudden disasters feel like, you should have no problem, right?" Aizawa smirked. That boy was going to be a handful. Eraserhead had known that ever since the moment the principal put down the stamp of approval on the boy's paper. Still, it appeared that the boy truly did have the necessary control, something one particular student on the teacher's mind was severely lacking. Nonetheless, Aizawa decided that Phantom must not feel cozy in his class. He was ahead of the rest, so Eraserhead had twice as bigger expectations from the American student. The school was all about going beyond, and if Fenton's limits were yet to be determined, Aizawa needed to see everything for himself. The tired-looking teacher knew about what his colleague Vlad King was like. While an outstanding hero and a mindful teacher, that man was extremely biased towards his students. If he got his hands on a boy that walked in tow with many pros, Fenton would just be basked in praise instead of being forced to grow. That was largely the reason why Aizawa had insisted that Fenton be assigned to his class. It took no small amount of convincing for Vlad King to surrender such a promising kid to another class. However, Nezu believed that Aizawa's arguments were more solid, and at the last second Danny was assigned to Class A. As Danny and Ida were about to take place at the start of the track, all students were either excited, curious, or both. Aizawa hadn't given the half-ghost much time to deliberate on how to approach the challenge. Danny didn't want unnecessary risks that came with experimenting. Last time he tried, he froze the entire arena full of spectators. Better not try anything where staying at school was on the line. As he and Ida stood near the starting line, the latter spoke up. "Have you figured it out, Fenton-san?" "Pretty much. As I said, I may not run that fast, but I have just the replacement." Danny grinned and raised his hand. He liked those theatrics more and more. With a snap of his fingers, the teen summoned the bright rings of light that changed his form with a loud whirring sound. Phantom's transformation earned strong reaction from the crowd around them. And here he goes, Kirishima exclaimed. Fenton is going all out. What's with that changed appearance? Someone asked. Well, Midoriya whispered and took out his journal. Fenton-san has energy control, and yet it somehow changed his looks as well. Is his quirk all about energy or is there something more to it? But what kind of energy even can change the way you look? We can hear you, Midoriya-san, Mina giggled. It's so cool to have a suit always ready. Now that she pointed it out, Danny's uniform was also gone, replaced by his usual hazmat. Did he already get his? That's not fair, the purple-haired shorty exclaimed. Aizawa probably should have addressed this, but there was no ground to assume that it was the suit that boosted the teen's power. The cause and effect were in fact switched. Furthermore, the teacher had read a more detailed description of the boy's power. Every student was required to make it. As expected, Phantom's was quite detailed. He would allow that change of attire, since it appeared that Danny's form always came with an outfit. Meanwhile, the teen in question was fully concentrated on the race. Taking a low starting position alongside Ida, he prepared to start. And the second the metaphorical gunshot resounded across the area, Ida burst forward. The pipes on his calves spewed the jet flames as the teen ran forward at an astonishing speed. Danny didn't waste a split second, reacting to the signal supernaturally quickly. The half his legs pushed him forward, and when he was in the air, in a fraction of a moment he turned intangible. The razor-sharp air resistance was no longer an obstacle to the speeding half-breed. And then the levitation, the power nigh exclusive to his ghost part, came in play. A jump meant a single burst of speed. The lack of resistance would not let the momentum die off, but the power of flight would only increase the latter's potency. To summarize, Phantom made a dash forward, the same way he did when he fought. The audience could barely see how fast the teen was. A single blink and some could miss the teen crossing the finish line, leaving speeding Ida behind. After this, Phantom tilted slightly upward, spun and faced the rest, stopping mid-air. 1.02 seconds. The machine barely had the time to announce the time before Ida finished the track with a result of 3.04 seconds. The stunned, bespectacled boy looked up several meters in the air to see the cross-legged half-ghost smiling at him. There was no doubt left in Ida's mind that that was the person who bested them all, the teen with speed that rivaled all mights. And atop of that, he can fly, too, Midoriya exclaimed excitedly, before filling his journal once again. Aizawa sighed. He was still unconvinced that all of that was due to some random energy. That little monster was certainly more than that. It took years, if not decades, to develop someone's quirk to such an extent. I told ya, Kirishima exclaimed. Don't get too full of yourself, Fenton-san. I'm the epitome of humility. Danny laughed, descending low enough to face Ida while still remaining in the air. That was an awesome result, Ida-san, he grinned toothily. I think you still gonna have that second place. Thank you, Fenton-san. There is no doubting that your result exceeds mine by a long shot. I still flew, and not ran. You still probably run faster. In case my flight shuts off, you are the go-to. Danny outstretched his arm and shook hands with Ida. In his hubris, the Halfa did not notice the look bakugou was giving him. And it was the gaze of utter hate. The reason behind the seemingly groundless hate was surprisingly easy. He had scored whole 77 villain points. Had it not been for Fenton, that annoying extra, he would have been on top. He was far smarter than that dumbass. The written test clearly showed it, made them nigh equal in terms of overall points. But the foreigner that had appeared out of nowhere still overtook him. Fenton got all the attention because of his flashy quirk. He was sitting atop of a high mountain, thinking he was hot shit, while he was nothing but an extra. Bakugou would show him and everyone that he was going to be on top, not that white-haired moron. The laughing half-ghost, surrounded by the fellow students and currently wrapping one of his hands around Ida as if they were long-time buddies, meanwhile remained blissfully unaware about the one-sided competition. Bakugou's trial came with an addition, in the form of another person the blonde despised. He didn't know how Deku, the worthless, quirkless nobody, made it into the school, let alone to top 10. It made Bakugou doubt that the rest of the students had even a fraction of his strength. Izuku would be the first one he crushed. While not knowing the reason behind Bakugou's hostility, Danny was still intrigued by the next pair. A bit bummed that Aizawa told him to remain human while not performing. He took his mind off of it and concentrated on the two students. It was an encounter behind the second strongest and the one who took down a zero-pointer. Admittedly, Phantom was more interested in what Midoriya would show. He appeared like a kindred spirit of sorts. What happened next was certainly flashy. Explosions, huh? Danny mumbled amidst surprised reactions of other students. Indeed, Bakugou's palms were the source of loud, yet small, booms and cracks. It was oddly fitting for a guy as hot-blooded as him. Danny could already conclude so from the brief, indirect confrontations they had. The fiery gusts propelled him forward almost as quickly as Ida. However, he was still visibly slower than the previous examinees. When he reached another end, the robot neutrally announced the result. 3.97 seconds. That was an impressive result on its own. However, Bakugou only gritted his teeth and cursed quietly. He had given it a lot of effort, yet he still was the third. If he wasn't going to overtake Fenton on this one, the rest of the extras sure as hell would not. And certainly not the green-haired nobody that lagged behind so much. As Bakugou expected, Midoriya's result was by far the worst one, as it took the boy over 7 seconds to cross that distance. No quirk was used during that exercise, which baffled the audience, but left Bakugou gloating on the inside. Of course, Deku would not use a quirk, because he had none. Why didn't he do anything? Danny quietly asked nobody in particular. Ochako-chan told me Mina was quick to rid her friend from the shackles of obliviousness. Midoriya-san got hurt a lot when he used his quirk. I see. The half mumbled, so he can't fully control it. But if he saves up till the last second, he will be outmatched. Decisions. He should concentrate on tests where his quirk shines the most. Ada concluded. If the drawback is as severe, yes, Danny shrugged. That's what he probably has in mind. Question is it really worth it? Little by little, all examinees were showing their prowess in the dash. Phantom and the rest of the students each observed closely what others could do. The Haffa was impressed by the score Mina showed by gliding on the acid she produced. Kirishima, too, showed a good result, but it was due to his own physical capabilities rather than his quirk. His hardening was hardly feasible in given situation. There were others, of course. Danny was genuinely curious to learn more about his classmates. By the end of the first trial, the teen remained mostly quite impressed. Their abilities mostly went beyond what Danny would usually imagine. For instance, there was a hulking giant of a man with many protruding limbs, or a girl that could leap like a frog and even had a couple of features resembling said amphibia. Another contestant caught Phantom's attention due to the fact that he slid across the ice ground. Ice control was something both of them shared, and unlike super strength, it was much higher in the priority list for the Haffa. The guy didn't talk much, however. The next test was that of endurance. People had to be creative in order to run 2 kilometers without fainting, and that was the whole point. Danny himself could utilize his ghost form once again. But since the goal here was to cross the line in a more generous amount of given time, he wasn't in any hurry. Besides, Aizawa came up and insisted that Phantom used his legs. That rule applied to everyone. After all, if Danny just flew the distance, he wouldn't make any proper effort. The teen wasn't that inventive. His ghost form could handle that level of physical strain. It did not produce the acids that burned one's muscles. It did not require him to breathe. The only thing that mattered was the energy output, and he still had more than enough. Thus, the Haffa planned on simply running the distance. His suit was not meant for that, though. He would be boiling in it by the end. That was probably the biggest challenge during his run. Somewhere after the first kilometer, the heat started getting to him. The ghost body also did not produce any sweat, so he was already extremely uncomfortable, convinced that he truly needed a proper suit. Somewhere in the distance, watching the screens, Aizawa could not resist a smirk. If Fenton chose to throw aside the provided uniform, then he would reap what he had sown. If it was a walk, Danny would have been taken in by the lush forests around. However, the beauty of the school grounds went over his heating head. Danny still ran fast enough, and once he made another turn on the road, he came across the same boy with half red, half white hair that controlled ice. The guy had overtaken everyone at the start, sliding across the ice trail he made, and Danny seemed to have caught up with him. The boy ran as normal now for some reason, so the Haffa reached him quickly and grinned, with neither of them stopping. "Hey there," he greeted again. "You are Todoroki, right?" The boy did not respond, and Danny finally noticed something. The white-haired part of the teen's face was covered in thin frost. It reminded the Haffa of when his core was awakening. Back then it made his teeth chatter in the middle of the hot autumn. "Sheesh, you all right there, pal?" Phantom asked. This doesn't look healthy. It still was intriguing to the Haffa. It appeared that the overuse of his power made Todoroki turn into an icicle. With Danny it was the opposite. If his power saw no release, then he would freeze over himself as his core spontaneously combusted with cold. "I'm fine," Todoroki said bluntly and increased his pace. Yeah, the guy was totally not the social one. He still gave Danny an idea. Phantom never tried sliding the way the other teen had been, but he had ice. Danny's eyes became cold blue, and under the teen's shoes the ground was being covered in a thin layer of snow. His core let out the cold it had kept inside, bringing out the cold breeze. The Haffa sighed, much better. Danny was not the first person to make it to the end. Ida was among those who overtook him, confirming what the Haffa had said. When it came to running, the stickler was the guy who was ahead of everyone. And among those who came before the half-ghost was bakugou, of which he was informed very subtly and politely. Not such hot shit anymore, eh? The blonde shouted almost into the half's face. Excuse me. Danny blinked. Know your place, you extra, bakugou said and did not elaborate further. Danny still had no idea what the guy meant by that moniker. Phantom also didn't like that attitude. It brought back the memories of the bullying Danny had to endure in the past. Bakugou was just the type to bully someone, and his attitude towards Midoriya was a clear indication of that. And if the blonde was going to persist, the half's patience was going to dry up. Danny already had a faint idea about what bakugou was trying to accomplish, but seriously, it wasn't even a race. The next test, a long-standing jump, ended in a stalemate between the two. Both bakugou and Fenton could make themselves airborne, so they easily reached the end of the sandbox, the maximum possible limit. Danny could see how frustrated the blonde was, and with all the restraint of Buddha, the half held back on his sarcasm at the time. The test was done largely the same for everyone. It was all about staying in the air for as long as possible, and it also often repeated the techniques used during the dash. What Phantom was concerned about was that Midoriya was still yet to use his quirk. Danny wasn't sure why he cared this much. The green-haired kid was someone he could relate to, he supposed. It was only natural, especially since others had no need for his assistance, even if only vocal. Midoriya was hesitant to answer Danny's question. It's just, I am not sure how I will end up afterwards, the boy answered. I figured as much, Danny sighed. But I suppose you are still physically stronger than that guy. He pointed at Minta, who landed face down in the sand. Cut to the sidestep part of the test and that same purple-haired shorty who actively bounced from the rubber balls he had mustered. Alright, so not all the time, Danny mumbled and turned to Izuku. Pretty cool, but this brings us to square one. I'll be fine, Fenton-san. The boy smiled and raised a thumb. Danny didn't believe a word of what was said, except maybe his last name. It was still Fenton, as much as he loathed it. As for the test itself, Phantom fared pretty admirably. He spent years fighting the most sleazy and agile creatures who also had the supernatural reflexes. Danny had learned to be pretty agile, although he really couldn't come up with anything to assist him in that particular test. The next segment of the tests was going to take place indoors. The first among them was grip strength, and for that Danny actually sought out Kirishima so that they could actually compete. The latter was eager to take him up on the challenge, despite probably knowing that the Haffa could bring out his all. The two got some extra audience as well, and Danny was a bit uncomfortable. In a span of half of their session, he was already at the center of attention from his peers. It felt unusual, uncomfortable even, but it also seemed like a very nice change of pace from the school he had dropped. Perhaps that was the reason behind the goofy smile the teen had and everyone could see. From his musings, the white-haired teen was interrupted by Kirishima. Come on, don't space out, Casper, he shouted. Let's give it our all. You first, brickhead, Danny teased. At his words, Kirishima hardened his right hand and lifted a small device that measured the aforementioned strength. The next second he pulled on it with all his strength. The display on the device showed the result of 346 kilograms, the result that was exceptional and normally unattainable, especially for someone Kirishima's age. The average one was several times lower. Nice going, Kirishima-kun. Mina cheered as Aizawa peeked over everyone's shoulders and wrote down the result on his notepad. Man, I wish I had muscles like these, mumbled a guy with blonde, streaked with black, hair. He also put a hand on his biceps and sighed. I'd say the result is quite manly. Danny copied his friend's speech pattern and smirked. Let's see how you do, Fenton-san. Kirishima fist pumped. Without saying another word, Danny gripped the device and pulled on it. The machine screeched, as if it was in pain, before a piece of the metal casing chipped off. And yet, it was functioning, and the display still showed the result. 999 kilos. Kirishima exclaimed in shock. It was a very imprecise result. Aizawa could see it. The device simply could not show any higher numbers. The manufacturer never anticipated that someone would reach higher than that, hence the damage to the machine. So it was safe to say that the boy could hit like a truck if him breaking robots with one finger wasn't enough. Honestly, it was like someone had purposefully created a living weapon. That boy had speed and strength that could rival All Might back in the day, and he had an entire arsenal of powers to boot. It really felt like back during their first encounter it was Aizawa that had dodged the bullet, and not the teen that was currently proudly grinning from ear to ear. That statement did not mean that Aizawa thought any higher of him because of that alone. A monkey with a grenade was equally as dangerous to people around, and just as uncontrollable. Still, by then Aizawa had made a mental note to later assign the prodigal student something special if he took everything in stride. When it came to a seated toe touch, Eraserhead, who had got tired of this by that point, had to write down a new power the boy possessed. He could bend and twist his body however he wanted, including the slight extension of his limbs, and the non-existence of spine in his ghost form. Aizawa was annoyed. That test was meant to breed innovation, not to make Fenton pull more rabbits out of his hat. That power was also something amiss from the given list. It seemed that even the teen himself couldn't always fully recollect every tool in his disposal. It sure was something to remember and remind the half of. Sit-ups. Phantom merely assisted himself with his floating ability. It truly wasn't anything special. What was special, however, was the beginning and the end of their test, the pitch for a ball throw. Maybe Aizawa wanted to be symbolic. Nonetheless, the one to step out first without any consultation was bakugou, unsurprisingly. Eraserhead had no objections, and the smirking blonde made sure to pass the half-ghost on his way, and even shove him. "Watch and learn, you extras," he shouted. "Geez, this guy is mean," Mina mumbled. "What did you do to make him so angry, Fenton-kun?" "I wounded the poor lad's pride," Danny said dramatically and wiped a non-existent tear. "And they call me vengeful." Bakugou heard all of that. That condescending tone drove the blonde mad, but he held back for just a moment. He had his own trial to complete first. Readying his hand for a throw, he shouted loudly into nothing. "Die." With a lot of noise, cracking, whooshing, and all other sound effects accompanying a loud concentrated explosion, the ball was launched forward. The smoke, the flames followed it like a long tail as the projectile flew forward. 705.2, Aizawa announced with disinterest. A large, malicious smile crossed Bakugou's features. "Huh, I beat you again, you upstart runt." He pointed towards Danny. Mina could see her friend's left eye tick. Who was he calling a runt? Danny was getting really tired from that one-sided competition. The blonde was just asking for a proper reaction. "Join the rest of the students, Bakugou," Aizawa ordered firmly. "You people are already taking too much time." He grumbled and took out some eye drops. After easing the dryness, he called out for more contestants. Apparently, Aizawa was not letting Danny rethrow, despite the fact that his throw was but an example of what's to come. The distance of Phantom's throw was still more than adequate, and Eraserhead wasn't going to dedicate time to whatever rivalry the two kids had instigated during the lesson. Besides, Danny himself wasn't the one that asked for the second throw. Rather, it was his friends that did. "Come on, Kirishima-san." Danny put a hand on his shoulder and smiled. "It's nothing. Just concentrate on your own result." Eraserhead was pleased with the maturity Phantom displayed, which led the teacher to correctly assume that rivalry was one-sided so far. He wasn't changing his decision, however. As the students tried their best with their quirks, there were some interesting things to see. One raven-haired girl actually pulled out a smaller pitching machine from her bare midriff, stunning some and activating some neurons in the minds of several boys. Mina glanced back and noticed a peculiar scene. What limit could there possibly be? Danny mumbled. "She probably needs some matter to turn into objects." Midoriya continued and wrote down their common observations. The girl grinned. Those two really were very much alike. "Nerds," as Bakugou so elaborately worded, growling quietly. The blonde was still feeling triumphant, and everyone could see it. The results Danny and Bakugou had shown were still unsurpassed until a certain point, when Ochako stepped into the metaphorical stage light. "What say you, Midoriya?" asked Danny. Getting no response, he glanced to the side and saw the boy blushing. "Midoriya-san." What?" The boy rapidly shook his head. "If she makes the ball avoid gravity, it might be easier for her to throw it, right?" "That's not how it works." Danny pointed at the pitch. As Midoriya looked at Uraraka, he and the rest of the students were surprised when the ball, instead of going forward, chose to go up. "The ball is in zero gravity, but we are not in space," the teen explained as they watched the ball go higher and higher. "The air resistance is a thing. The ball is also weightless, which doesn't help either." "How are you a D student, Danny-kun?" asked Mina. Danny only shrugged, before hearing a beep from the machine that determined the distance of the throw. When he saw it, his expression became that of surprise. "Infinity." Several people in class shouted in shock. "Aizawa seems to really like bullshit surprises," Danny muttered. "What kind of distance counting is that?" "She did throw the ball. It just went up." Mina gave a thumbs up. "His name sounds familiar somehow," Midoriya muttered. "Do you know him?" "Yeah, we met before. I later did my homework." "Never mind that." Danny's face became more serious. "You go next, pal. You are the last one." Midoriya gulped and took a sigh. "All right, here I go. This is the last test. You either use your strength now or never," Phantom stated. And as the green-haired aspiring hero went towards the pitch, Mina approached her half-ghost friend. "You seem pretty invested in this guy. I don't want anyone to be ousted on their first day, even if it is inevitable." I'm not intrusive, am I? Nope, Mina popped her tongue. It's really sweet you are trying to help everyone. We can all learn from each other. Just don't let it get into your head, spook. You aren't always on top. Danny chuckled and got up from his seat. The tests did make this clear. Alrighty then. Let's see if I make a good advisor, at least. The half-ghost and everyone else could see Midoriya readying for the throw. The green-haired boy's body was covered in what could only be described as crimson-pinkish ruptures of energy. Midoriya took a sigh and with all the strength he could muster he launched the ball. Before it landed less than 50 meters away. The stunned silence of disbelief was only interrupted by guffaws from bakugou. Everyone was trying to make head or tail of what just happened. And Izuku was probably the one who was shocked the most. His eyes were wide and his mouth slightly agape. He had prepared to throw the ball. Everyone could see and feel the force he was about to put into that. But, I was trying to use it just now, Midoriya mumbled. What how? I erased it. Every student looked towards their teacher, and to say that he had a fearsome presence was an understatement. His loosely hanging scarf was now floating in the air, alongside his long, shaggy hair. The man's look was collected, yet obviously annoyed, with his eyes glowing red. How many times will I have to say how ridiculous an entrance exam is? It is a complete ruse, considering someone like you got in. You erased it, Midoriya repeated. Before the man's name, the man's ability combined, and something in the boy's head clicked. You're an erasure hero, Eraserhead. Danny now felt awkward for not telling anyone. But honestly, nobody properly asked. Aizawa ignored the chattering crowd, continuing with his small enlightening lecture. I saw how well you handle your quirk, which is to say, you can't control it at all. What were you hoping for after you broke every single bone in your body? That someone else would come to save others and you in addition. That someone will assist a hero in need. No, I wasn't. Duh. The hero's sturdy scarf didn't let the boy finish, as it was tightly wrapped around the teen. Danny didn't know how Aizawa made it work like a bunch of tentacles. Telekinesis wasn't the man's power. There must have been some advanced tech in play. Whatever you were planning, Aizawa hissed. It would have inconvenienced those around you. Way back, a certain hot-blooded hero saved over 1,000 people during a disaster. He made himself a legend. You've got the same restless streak, but you are totally useless after saving just a single person. Midoriya Izuku. He paused before announcing his verdict. You cannot become a hero with that power of yours. The hero's words made a lot of sense to the half-ghost, too. Initially Danny had to rely on his friends a lot. His powers were still young, he had little control and broke more than one bone in the process, and it led to his friends being harmed too. Phantom was faced with the horrible reality that he could heal from anything, while Sam and Tucker were only humans. One time he went to school, completely fine, while Tucker was limping the whole week with sprained leg. The night before Danny had had several broken bones, internal bleeding in multiple places. His friends had no idea how many injuries he sustained. Had he not had the power of regeneration, his entire body would have been riddled with scars. He would have been rendered blind and crippled. But as he returned to his home in the middle of the night, haphazardly wrapping the flimsy bandages, he lay down in his bed and had everything healed by the morning. That's why ghosts never held back their punches. A lost limb was but an inconvenience. Danny didn't want to be an inconvenience, a burden. He didn't want to force his friends into such a danger just so they could alleviate some of his pain. However, there was also another thing, something Aizawa was terribly wrong about. Danny got less and less harmed as the time went. He grew stronger, he gained control over his power, and his fights against most of the undead foes ended quickly. Aizawa had already crossed Midoriya out without even seeing if there was an actual room for growth, and was ready to shunt any attempt at getting better with his power. And Midoriya most certainly held the necessary spirit. And thus, despite agreeing with the initial message, Danny couldn't possibly agree with the man's verdict. The Haffa also knew that if he spoke up now, it would only make the situation worse. This is too harsh, Mina mumbled. Will Midoriya-san be alright? We can only hope, Danny commented, while giving Eraserhead a brief glare. Something told him that if he had resisted the arrest, that man would have chased him to the end of the earth. Looking back at Midoriya, Danny could see the sudden flash of determination in his eyes. Yes, the Haffa thought with confidence. He got it. Danny gave the fellow nerd a thumbs up, while other students who had had a chance to interact with the unfortunate teen were much more vocal with their support. Yes, Danny still wasn't confident enough for such open display of emotions in front of everyone. What are you shouting about? Bakugou barked. This quirkless nobody can't do jack shit. But Danny was confident enough for that. Have your powers flashbanged you by any chance? He asked the blonde. We all saw that energy in Midoriya. You're just being in denial. It's you who can't accept the simplest thing, dumbass. There is no way that no good wannabe can produce anything but a wet fart. Alright, you. Their brief argument was soon concluded when Midoriya finally made a throw. And what a launch it was. With a loud noise of the air being teared through, the ball flew forward. This earned several surprised gasps from the audience, and a triumphant smirk on Danny's face, with which he rewarded the blonde bully. The distance measuring machine soon announced the result. 705.3. That was higher than what both Fenton and bakugou had done. Danny was surprised himself, for it appeared that even at that stage Midoriya was as strong as his human form. What's there to say about the boy's strength when he actually improved? But that was bound to come with a drawback, wasn't it? Aizawa-sensei, the joyous, panting Midoriya looked at the teacher and smiled. Everyone could see how one of his fingers was purple and swollen, like he had slammed it hard in a door. I can still move. Even the ever-apathetic hero teacher could not resist the emotion that appeared on his face. Aizawa gave a small smirk. This kid. He mumbled inaudibly. Way to go, Midoriya-san. Kirishima shouted louder than anyone. That was so manly. He has most certainly improved since the entrance exam, Ida said, having witnessed the teen's performance back then. Danny recalled Mina's words just before Midoriya had gone to the stage. Yes, he wasn't going to be on top in every aspect, whether by mistake, coincidence, or his own weaker self. He certainly would not ask Aizawa to let him make another throw. Better not break that euphoric idyll Izuku was going through. But there was always one person that wanted to ruin the moment. What the hell, Deku? Bakugou roared across the entire pitch. As he started narrowing the distance towards the terrified teen, he demanded loudly, "Explain yourself." Danny decided that that was enough. The eyes of his currently human form glowed green as he lightly raised his palm. The rapid step of bakugou was interrupted by him bumping full force into a wall of energy. Can you not be an obnoxious prick for a fraction of a second? Danny finally blew up. That guy was just asking to get punched. Before furious bakugou could retaliate, Aizawa interfered. His scarf lunged at the rampant blonde and held him tight in place. Bakugou snarled and tried to get out, but to little avail. What the hell is this? Bakugou said through his clenched teeth, still unable to move. It is a capture weapon, carbon fiber and a special alloy wire, Aizawa tiredly explained. Geez, you are giving me a dry eye. And then his look turned towards Danny. Fenton, do not jump in before your teachers. But Aizawa's look gave no room for debates. You are unused to this, but we have discipline in place, Fenton. You are not at home where you were free to do whatever you liked. Here, you listen to the rules. Got it. It was clear to Danny what the man was insinuating. He had read Phantom's file, all right. Danny begrudgingly nodded and looked away. Fine. When bakugou finally calmed down, Aizawa let him go, before pouring a couple of eye drops. I'll announce the results shortly. Take your last breaths until then. The teacher smirked. Danny couldn't say that he watched everyone closely during the tests. Sure, he might have had some names memorized, and could certainly recollect what each student was able to do. But for the most part their results were a mystery to the half-ghost. So, the intrigue was largely there. But that feeling when you know you did splendidly and yet had a chance to fail was there. Obviously Danny wasn't the worst case, so he wasn't that worried. What he was worried about was Midoriya. Yes, his last test was superb, and yet the rest did not go that well. He really didn't want to see the green-haired teen kicked out. Izuku was determined and potentially incredibly strong. And if there was no place in that school for someone like him, then what kind of school was that? As everyone approached their teacher, the tension in the air could almost be touched. The silence among the students was a cue for the teacher to begin. Okay, time for your results. Explaining the principles behind them will be a total waste of time, so here they are. Aizawa pressed a button before the screen in front of them started showing the names of the students in descending order. And the first one on that list was Fenton Daniel. Upon seeing his name, followed by Todoroki and Yaoyorozu, the girl that could produce objects out of thin air, Danny laughed happily, and also gleefully, because in the fourth place everyone could see bakugou's name. He wasn't even in the top 3, and to say that the boy was pissed was to say nothing. As the list kept going down, Danny approached the blonde and leaned forward with a smile on his face. Don't worry, bakugou. You will always be number 2 to me. What did you just say? Bakugou exclaimed, before the teacher's pointed look towards them extinguished the conflict. I see you cannot deal with this defeat, Danny said quietly as his eyes, that were transfixed on the screen, glowed once more. I can see now why you were so angry with me at the start. I scored more than you. Get to the point, bakugou growled quietly, careful not to provoke Aizawa. I tried to befriend as many as I could, but I suppose some things are inevitable. two can play this game of contrived rivalry. And until you manage to actually best me, you will always be number 2, Danny smirked. The last beep signaled that everyone's name was already on the screen, and Danny's eyes immediately darted towards the last spot. To his inner dread, on the bottom of the list was Midoriya. Fudge, Danny mumbled as bakugou began laughing once more. Do I have to freeze your mouth shut? By the way, Aizawa spoke. I was lying. Nobody is getting expelled. What? Everyone yelled. That was a rational deception meant to bring out the best in you, Eraserhead explained. So he preferred a whip to a carrot. Dully noted. Still, nobody was going to give the student their lost hair that all the stress had deprived them of. Well, of course it was a lie, said Yaoyorozu. She may have sounded condescending, but she actually looked surprised that nobody else figured it out. I'm sorry, I should have said something. Danny gave her a smile that was completely devoid of emotion. Yes, that would have been very much appreciated. Don't look at me like that. She shook her hands in embarrassment. Aizawa coughed to get everyone's attention. It was a test to measure your capabilities, and I would say that it was a success. The teacher pressed another button and the image with the performance chart vanished. In any case, we are done here. When you return to the classroom you will find your curriculum. Give it a look. And Midoriya, go to Recovery Girl and have her patch you up. Tomorrow's trials aren't going to be any easier. Who is Recovery Girl? Danny quietly asked Mina. Oh, she is the nurse here. Haven't you met her during the exam? She tilted her head. Didn't have the need to see a doctor. I also don't like checkups. Phantom shivered, causing the nearest people to snicker. Is our strong, bad ghost afraid of doctors? Kirishima laughed, rather than being overzealous. Hey, Midoriya, Danny called out to the still stunned green-haired boy. Will you be alright getting to the nurse on your own? It's just a finger, Izuku responded, visibly happy about how everything turned out in the end. Thank you for your support, too. I mean it for everyone. Danny couldn't help but smile. At that moment, surrounded by his friendly and energetic classmates, many of whom were already extremely good, Phantom felt like his first day at a new school was a success. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author RusEmp on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.